The rain hammered down on the Missouri frontier like judgment itself, turning the dirt roads into rivers of mud that swallowed boots and wagon wheels alike. It was the kind of storm that made folks huddle in their homes and pray, the kind that reminded everyone how small they really were against the fury of nature. But 7-year-old Ruby Morrison wasn't praying. She was running. Her bare feet slipped in the mud as she scrambled through the darkness, her thin cotton dress already soaked through, clinging to her small frame like a second skin. Behind her, she could hear them shouting, their voices cutting through the thunder like rusted blades. Find that little brat, she's worth good money. The men chasing her weren't her father's creditors exactly, but they might as well have been demons crawled up from hell itself. Jake Tanner and his boys had come to collect what they claimed was owed, and when her mother couldn't pay, they'd decided Ruby would fetch a fine price at Miss Catherine's establishment 3 towns over. They called it a boarding house, but everyone knew what really went on behind those painted doors. "Mama said run," Ruby whispered to herself, the words lost in the storm. "Mama said find help." She could still see her mother's face, pale and desperate, as she'd shoved Ruby toward the back door. Sadie Morrison, who'd once worn silk dresses and attended garden parties in St. Louis, reduced to bargaining for her daughter's freedom with men who saw them both as nothing more than currency. The lightning split the sky, illuminating the landscape for a heartbeat, and Ruby saw it. A barn maybe half a mile ahead, its weathered boards dark against the flashing sky. She had heard tell of the man who lived out here 5 miles from town. Cole Hartley, they called him. The broken soldier who'd come back from the war with a limp and ghosts in his eyes. Children in town whispered that he ate snakes and talked to the dead. Adults just said he was touched in the head living alone on that ranch where his family had died of yellow fever 3 years back. But Ruby didn't care if he was crazy. Crazy was better than what waited for her if Tanner's men caught up. She stumbled through a field of tall grass that whipped at her legs, each blade sharp as a tiny knife. The barn grew larger, more solid, a promise of shelter in the chaos. Behind her, she heard the dogs now. Tanner had brought his hunting hounds. Their baying, mixed with the thunder, created a symphony of terror that pushed her forward even as her lungs burned for air. The barn door was slightly ajar, swaying in the wind. Ruby didn't hesitate. She squeezed through the gap and tumbled onto the hay-strewn floor, her body shaking from cold and fear. The sudden absence of rain was almost shocking, though water still dripped from the roof in a dozen places, creating small puddles that reflected the lightning flashes. The barn smelled of horses and old leather, of grain, and that particular scent of weathered wood. Ruby crawled behind a stack of feed sacks, pulling her knees to her chest, trying to make herself as small as possible. She could hear the horses stirring in their stalls, nervous from the storm. Then she heard something else. Footsteps. Slow, uneven, one foot falling heavier than the other. A lantern's glow preceded the man into the barn, casting long shadows that danced on the walls. Cole Hartley looked nothing like the monster the children had described. He was tall, but not giant, broad-shouldered, but not brutish. His face, illuminated by the lantern light, bore the weathered lines of someone who'd seen too much too young. Dark hair fell over his forehead, and his eyes, when they swept the barn, were the color of winter sky, gray and distant. He was wearing a long duster coat over plain work clothes, and yes, he walked with a pronounced limp favoring his left leg. But there was nothing frightening about him, Ruby thought. Just something deeply, profoundly sad. "I know you're in here," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "Heard you come in over the storm. That's quite a feat." Ruby held her breath, pressing harder against the feed sacks. Those dogs getting closer. Cole continued setting the lantern on a barrel. Tanner's hounds by the sound of them. He only brings those out when he's hunting something he considers valuable. The word something instead of someone made Ruby's stomach turn. That's all she was to them. A thing to be sold. Cole moved toward the feed sacks with that uneven gait, and Ruby knew she was caught. She scrambled out from her hiding spot, ready to run again, but her legs gave out. She fell to her knees in the hay, looking up at him with eyes that had seen too much for her 7 years. "Please, mister," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please don't let them take me. They want to sell me to Miss Catherine's, and Mama said that's a fate worse than dying." Cole studied her for a long moment. In the distance, the dogs were getting louder. "What's your name, child?" "Ruby. Ruby Morrison." Something flickered in his eyes at the surname. "Sadie Morrison's girl." Ruby nodded, surprised he knew her mother's name. Cole was quiet for a moment. Then he shrugged off his duster coat and wrapped it around Ruby's shaking shoulders. It was still warm from his body heat and smelled of tobacco and leather. "You stay right here," he said. "Don't move. Don't make a sound, no matter what you hear." "Understand." Ruby nodded again, pulling the coat tighter. Cole picked up the lantern and headed for the barn door. As he reached it, he pulled something from behind a beam, a rifle well-oiled and ready. He checked it with practiced ease, then stepped out into the storm. Ruby could hear voices now, Tanner's rough growl carrying over the rain. "We know she came this way. Hartley hand her over, and we'll be on our way. No need for trouble. Only trouble here is you, Tanner." Cole's voice was steady as bedrock. "This is private property. You're trespassing. We're looking for stolen property ourselves. That girl's mother owes us considerable money." "A child isn't property," Cole said, and there was something dangerous in his tone now. "And debts don't transfer to children, not in any law I recognize." "Law?" Tanner laughed, ugly and sharp. "What law reaches out here? Hartley. You think anyone in town's gonna care what happens to some debtor's brat?" The sound of a rifle being cocked cut through the rain like thunder of a different kind. "I care," Cole said simply. "And that's all the law you need to worry about tonight. Turn around, take your dogs, and get off my land. Don't come back." There was a long silence, broken only by rain and wind. Ruby held her breath, the coat wrapped around her like armor, like hope. Finally, Tanner spoke again, his voice bitter. "This ain't over, Hartley. That girl's worth good money, and her mother's debt is real. We'll be back with the sheriff." "You do that," Cole replied. "Sheriff Thompson and I served together at Shiloh. I'm sure he'll be real interested to hear about your plans for a 7-year-old girl." The threat of legal scrutiny seemed to give Tanner pause. After another tense moment, Ruby heard the dogs being called off, the sound of horses and men retreating into the storm. Cole waited a long time before coming back into the barn, water streaming from his hair and clothes. He found Ruby exactly where he'd left her, still wrapped in his coat, tears streaming down her face. "They're gone," he said simply. "They'll come back," Ruby whispered. "They always come back. And Mama. Oh God, Mama's still there with them." Cole knelt beside her, his bad leg protesting, and for the first time Ruby saw something shift in those gray eyes, a spark of something that might have been purpose. "Then we'll go get her," he said. "But first, you need to tell me everything. Start from the beginning." As Ruby began to speak, her voice mixing with the dying storm, neither of them knew that this moment, this unlikely meeting in a barn on a rain-soaked night, would change both their lives forever. The broken soldier and the desperate child, brought together by cruelty, but bound by something stronger, the simple human need to protect what's good in a world gone dark. The storm was passing, but their story was just beginning. The morning after, the storm broke clean and bright, as if the world had been washed new. But inside Cole Hartley's modest ranch house, the air hung heavy with unspoken truths and decisions waiting to be made. Ruby sat at the rough-hewn kitchen table, drowning in one of Cole's old shirts that served as a makeshift dress, while her own clothes dried by the fire. She watched him move about the kitchen with that distinctive, uneven gait, preparing what looked to be the first real meal she'd seen in days. Cole Hartley wasn't what folks in town made him out to be. Yes, he was quiet, and yes, he lived alone on this ranch that should have held a family. But there was nothing mad about him, Ruby decided. Just broken in places that didn't show unless you knew where to look. The way his hands trembled slightly when he thought she wasn't watching. The way he set 4 plates on the table before catching himself and putting 2 back. The way he avoided looking at the closed door at the end of the hall. "Eggs and biscuits," he said, setting a plate before her. "Nothing fancy, but it'll fill your belly." Ruby ate like she hadn't seen food in a week, which wasn't far from the truth. Between bites, she studied the man who'd saved her. He was younger than she'd first thought, maybe 35, though the lines around his eyes made him seem older. His hands were scarred from work and war. And when he reached for his coffee cup, she noticed 2 fingers on his left hand didn't bend quite right. "You knew my mama's name," she said finally. Cole paused coffee cup halfway to his lips. "Everyone knows the Morrisons. Your grandfather's Judge Morrison, richest man in 3 counties. Was," Ruby corrected. "Mama says we're not Morrisons anymore, not since she married Papa and had me." Cole set down his cup carefully. "Your father was Samuel Turner. Wasn't he worked the Blackwood mine?" Ruby nodded. "He died last winter. Cave in, they said, but Mama thinks different. Says the support beams were cut deliberate-like, on account of Papa trying to organize the miners for better wages. And the debt. Papa borrowed from Jake Tanner to buy medicine when I was sick with the lung fever. Only it wasn't just money he owed. Tanner added interest, then more interest, then fees for this and that, until it was 10 times what Papa borrowed. When Papa died," Ruby's voice trailed off. Cole's jaw tightened. "Tanner came collecting. Mama sold everything. Her wedding ring, Papa's watch, even the Bible her own mama gave her. But it wasn't enough. Never is with men like Tanner." Ruby pushed eggs around her plate, appetite suddenly gone. "That's when he said I could work off the debt at Miss Catherine's. Said little girls fetch good money from certain kinds of men." The sound of Cole's fist hitting the table made Ruby jump. He stood abruptly pacing to the window, his limp more pronounced when he was agitated. "I'm sorry," Ruby said quickly. "I didn't mean to bring trouble to your door. I didn't know where else to run." Cole turned from the window, and Ruby saw something in his face that reminded her of her father, that fierce protectiveness that good men wore like armor. "You did right," he said. "Running to me was the smartest thing you could have done. Because you're not afraid of Tanner." "Because I've got nothing left to lose," Cole said simply. "That makes a man dangerous in ways folks like Tanner can't understand." He sat back down this time, really looking at Ruby. "You remind me of someone," he said quietly. "My daughter Emily. She would have been about your age." Ruby knew better than to ask what happened. The whole county knew about the yellow fever outbreak 3 years back, how it had swept through like wildfire, taking Cole's wife Margaret and daughter Emily in the space of a week. How Cole had been away, helping a neighbor with a barn raising, and came home to find them already gone. "I'm good at helping," Ruby offered. "Mama taught me to cook and clean and mend. I can tend chickens and gather eggs. I know herbs, too. Learned from an Indian woman who helped Mama when I was born. I can earn my keep, Mr. Hartley. I won't be a burden." Cole studied her with those gray eyes that seemed to see straight through to her soul. "How old are you, Ruby Trueage, now?" 7 and 3 months, she said proudly. "But Mama says I'm old for my years." "Too old," Cole muttered. "No child should know the things you know." He stood again, moving to a cabinet where he pulled out paper and a pencil. "I need you to draw me a map," he said. "Show me where your mother is, where Tanner's men might be holding her." Ruby took the pencil, her small hand moving across the paper with surprising precision. "We were staying at Widow Chen's boarding house, the real kind, not like Miss Catherine's. It's on Elm Street near the milliner's shop. But Tanner's men came at dawn yesterday. Mama made me hide under the floor. There's a loose board in our room. I heard them talking, saying they'd keep her at the old Briggs warehouse until they figured out what to do." "The warehouse by the river," Ruby nodded. Tanner uses it for his business. Mama says he stores things there that aren't quite legal. Cole studied the map, his mind clearly working through possibilities. Your mother, is she strong? I mean, could she ride if we got her out? Mama's the strongest person I know, Ruby said firmly. She gave up everything for Papa, and after he died, she never once cried where I could see. She can ride and shoot, and she knows her letters and numbers better than most men. Grandfather made sure of that before he cast her out. Why did he cast her out? Really, Ruby bit her lip. Because Papa was poor and Irish and Catholic. Because Mama loved him anyway. Because she chose love over money. And Grandfather couldn't forgive that. Cole folded the map carefully. We're going to get your mother, he said. But I need you to understand something, Ruby. This might get ugly. Tanner won't give up easy, and your grandfather. He might try to use the situation to his advantage. I don't care, Ruby said fiercely. I just want Mama safe. Cole moved to another cabinet, this one locked. He pulled out a key from around his neck and opened it, revealing a collection of weapons that spoke to his soldier's past. He selected a pair of Colt revolvers, checking each with practiced efficiency. Can you shoot? Ruby asked. When I have to. He looked at her seriously. There's something else you should know. Your mother. I met her once years ago before the war. It was at a harvest dance. She was maybe 17, fresh from finishing school, and every man in 3 counties was trying to get her attention. Ruby leaned forward, eager for any story about her mother's happier days. But she only had eyes for this skinny Irish boy who was playing fiddle with the band, Sam Turner. He played like the devil himself was guiding his bow, and your mother danced every dance scandal be damned. Cole's expression softened at the memory. I admired her for that. Takes courage to follow your heart in a world that wants to dictate your every move. Did you dance with her? Once, Cole admitted. She was kind enough to give a shy soldier a turn around the floor. Told me I should find myself a girl who looked at me the way she looked at Sam. Did you? I did, Cole said quietly. Margaret was at that same dance serving punch and trying to avoid her own suitors. We were married 6 months later. The pain that crossed his face was so raw that Ruby reached out impulsively and took his scarred hand. They're together now, she said, with the simple faith of childhood. You're Margaret and Emily. They're watching over you. Mama says the dead never really leave us. Cole squeezed her small hand gently. Your mama sounds like a wise woman. The wisest, Ruby agreed. That's why we have to save her. Cole stood, decision made. We'll leave at dusk. Less chance of being seen. But first, we need to make you look less like Ruby Morrison and more like my nephew visiting from Kansas. Ruby's eyes widened. You want me to pretend to be a boy? Safer that way. Boys can move about without as much notice. He gestured to the hallway. There's a trunk in the spare room. Emily's clothes are too small, but there might be some of my old things from when I was young. We'll cut them down to fit. As Ruby headed down the hall, she paused at the closed door Cole never opened. Without thinking, she tried the handle. It turned easily, revealing a room frozen in time. A small bed with a patchwork quilt dolls arranged on a shelf. A rocking chair by the window, where someone once sang lullabies. Cole found her standing in the doorway, tears running down her face. She was loved, Ruby said softly. You can feel it in this room. Every minute of every day. Cole confirmed, his voice thick. That's all any child really needs, Ruby said, wise beyond her years. Mama loves me like that. That's why I have to help her. Cole gently closed the door. Then let's get you ready for a rescue mission. As they worked together, cutting down clothes and planning their approach, something shifted in the ranch house. The heavy silence that had pressed down on it for 3 years began to lift, replaced by purpose and determination. Cole taught Ruby hand signals he'd used in the war, showed her how to move quiet as a shadow, and most importantly, where to run if things went wrong. The sheriff's office, he instructed. Sheriff Thompson is a good man. Tell him Cole Hartley sent you. Tell him about Shiloh and the night we held the line. He'll protect you. What about you?" "I'll be fine," Cole said, checking his weapons one last time. "I've survived worse than Jake Tanner." As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, they prepared to leave. Ruby, now dressed as a boy, with her hair tucked under a cap, looked nothing like the terrified child who'd stumbled into Cole's barn the night before. There was steel in her spine, now borrowed from the broken soldier who'd given her hope. "Mr. Hartley," she said as they mounted his horse, a sturdy bay named Tempest. "Call me Cole Boy," he said, settling her in front of him in the saddle. "We're family now, remember." "Cole." She tested the name. "What if Tanner won't let her go?" Cole's arms came around her to take the reins steady and sure, despite his injuries. "Then I'll remind him what happens when you corner a man who's already lost everything he loved. Sometimes Ruby the Broken Ones are the most dangerous because we're not afraid of being broken again." As they rode toward town, toward danger and uncertainty, Ruby leaned back against Cole's chest, feeling safer than she had since her father died. Behind them, the ranch stood empty but no longer abandoned. It was waiting like Cole had been waiting for life to return to its rooms. The rescue of Sadie Morrison would either bring that life or end what little Cole had left. But as they rode through the gathering dusk, neither the broken soldier nor the brave little girl looked back. They had eyes only for what lay ahead, a mother to save a debt to settle, and perhaps, if they were very lucky, a new kind of family forged from loss and found in the most unlikely of places. The town lay quiet in the purple dusk as Cole and Ruby approached from the back trails, avoiding the main road where Tanner's men might be watching. They dismounted near the old cemetery, tying Tempest to an iron gate that hadn't been oiled in years. The rusted hinges seemed to whisper warnings as they creaked in the evening breeze. "Tell me about the war," Ruby whispered as they crept through the shadows between buildings. She wasn't really curious about battles and glory. She'd heard enough of those tales. What she wanted was to understand the ghosts that lived behind Cole's eyes. Cole paused, scanning the alley ahead before answering. "War's not something you tell. It's something that happens to you, and then you spend the rest of your life trying to forget. But you can't forget." "No," he admitted. "You can't." They moved forward, keeping to the darkness, but Cole's mind was already sliding backward, pulled by memories that Ruby's simple question had unleashed. "I was 22 when I enlisted," he said quietly. "Your mother's brother, actually, William Morrison, he was in my unit. We'd grown up together different as night and day. He had the money and education, I had the strong back and steady aim. But war doesn't care about any of that." They paused behind a stack of crates, watching as two of Tanner's men passed by, laughing about something crude. Once they were gone, Cole continued moving, Ruby following like a small shadow. "William saved my life at Shiloh," Cole said. "Second day of fighting, I took grape shot to the leg. Would have bled out in that damn peach orchard if he hadn't dragged me to safety. He was hit 3 times doing it, but he kept pulling, kept moving. Said he'd promised someone he'd look after me. Who? Never found out. William died that night, holding my hand and making me promise to survive, to go home, and live the life he wouldn't get to have." Cole's voice went rough. "I kept that promise for 8 years, built the ranch, married Margaret, had Emily. Then the fever came and took it all anyway." They reached the back of the Briggs warehouse, its wooden walls silvered with age and neglect. Through the cracks, they could see lamplight and hear voices. Cole pulled Ruby behind a rain barrel, crouching despite the protest from his bad leg. "That's why you're helping us," Ruby said, understanding flooding through her. "Because of your promise to Mama's brother." "Partly," Cole admitted, "but mostly because I'm tired of watching good people get crushed by men like Tanner. Your mother chose love over money, chose freedom over security. That takes the kind of courage you don't see much anymore." Through a gap in the warehouse wall, they could see inside. Sadie Morrison sat tied to a chair, her once fine dress torn and dirty, her face bearing a fresh bruise that made Ruby's hands clench into fists. But her back was straight, her chin lifted in defiance. Jake Tanner paced in front of her, a thin man with the kind of nervous energy that reminded Cole of a rabid dog. "Just sign the papers, woman. Sign your daughter over as my legal ward and I'll forgive the debt. Simple as that." "I'd rather die," Sadie said, her voice clear and strong despite her split lip. "That can be arranged," Tanner snarled, "but it'd be a waste. You're still pretty enough to fetch a decent price yourself if you weren't so damn stubborn. Some men like that in a woman, the breaking of it." Cole felt Ruby trembling with rage beside him. He put a steadying hand on her shoulder. "I need to tell you something," Ruby whispered suddenly, "about Papa's death, about what really happened." Cole looked at her, seeing tears gathering in her eyes. "Papa found out something about Tanner, something about girls going missing, young girls from poor families. They'd disappear, and Tanner would say they'd run off or found work elsewhere. But Papa knew better. He'd seen the ledgers one night when he was loading freight. Names and prices and destinations, New Orleans, San Francisco, places where nobody would ask questions about where a girl came from." Cole's blood ran cold. "Your father was going to expose him." Ruby nodded. "He went to Judge Morrison first, thinking surely Mama's father would help stop such evil. But the judge, he was getting a cut. 10% of every sale, Papa said. That's how he stayed the richest man in 3 counties. He was selling other people's daughters while keeping his own locked up in finishing school." The pieces clicked into place in Cole's mind. "So they killed your father, made it look like an accident, then came after us with the deet, knowing Mama would never have anywhere to turn." Ruby's voice was steady now, the tears dried by anger. "Mama doesn't know about the judge's involvement. She still thinks there might be good in him somewhere." Inside the warehouse, Tanner had stopped pacing. He pulled out a knife, running his thumb along the blade. "Last chance, Sadie. Sign the papers or things get unpleasant." "Go to hell," Sadie spat. Tanner backhanded her, the crack echoing through the warehouse. Ruby started forward, but Cole held her back. "Not yet," he whispered. "I need to know how many men he has." He counted quickly. Tanner, 2 guards by the door, 1 by the window. 4 men total, all armed. Not impossible odds, but not favorable either, especially with Sadie tied up in the middle of it all. "I'm going to tell you a story," Tanner said, pulling a chair close to Sadie, "about a young soldier who came home from the war to find his family business in ruins. His father had backed the wrong side, you see, and the carpetbaggers came calling. Took everything, the house, the land, even the family burial plot." Sadie remained silent, but Cole could see her listening. "That soldier had to rebuild from nothing," Tanner continued. "Had to claw and scrape and do things that would make decent folks sick. But he survived. He thrived. And he learned that in this world, you're either the one holding the leash or you're the dog wearing the collar." "You're not a survivor," Sadie said quietly. "You're a parasite. You feed on others' misery because you're too weak to build anything real." Tanner's face flushed red. He raised the knife, and Cole knew they were out of time. "Stay here," he told Ruby. "No matter what you hear, stay hidden until I call for you." He stepped out from behind the rain barrel, walking straight toward the warehouse's main door with that distinctive, uneven gait. He didn't try to hide. In fact, he wanted them to see him coming. "Evening, boys." He called out, his voice carrying the lazy confidence of a man with nothing to lose. "Heard you were having a party. Thought I'd invite myself." The guards scrambled for their guns, but Cole already had his Colts drawn, 1 trained on each man. "I'd think twice," he said conversationally. "These hands might shake sometimes, but they still remember how to put a bullet exactly where I want it." Tanner appeared in the doorway, his own gun drawn. "Hartley, should have known you'd stick your nose where it doesn't belong." "Oh, it belongs," Cole said, still moving forward with that steady, limping walk. "See, I've been doing some thinking about you, Tanner, about how a man with no visible means of support manages to live so well. About those girls who go missing. About mine shaft accidents that aren't accidents at all. You can't prove anything. Don't need to, Cole replied. This isn't a court of law. This is just you, me, and the promise I made to a dying man to protect what's good in this world. He was close enough now to see Sadie through the doorway. Her eyes widened with recognition and something else. Hope. You remember William Morrison, Cole asked Tanner, Sadie's brother. He died in my arms at Shiloh, died saving my worthless life. And you know what his last words were. Tanner didn't answer, but his gun hand had started to shake slightly. He said, look after them. When you get home, look after my family. I thought he meant his parents, but they didn't need looking after. They had money and power and cold hearts that didn't deserve his concern. Cole took another step forward. He meant Sadie. Even then he knew she'd choose her own path, and that path would be hard. He wanted someone to watch over her. Touching story, Tanner sneered. But it doesn't change anything. She owes me money. No? Cole said. She doesn't. Her husband owed you money, and he's dead. Under territorial law, debts don't transfer to widows unless they co-sign the loan. Did Sadie co-sign? Tanner's silence was answer enough. Then we're done here, Cole said. Cut her loose, and everyone walks away. You think you can just walk in here and take what's mine? Tanner's voice rose to nearly a shriek. I own this town, I own the law. You own nothing, Cole replied. You're a small man playing at being big, and I'm tired of the game. That's when Cole saw it. The slight shift in Tanner's stance, the tell that every soldier learned to recognize. He was going to shoot. Time slowed the way it always did in moments like this. Cole's body remembered what his mind tried to forget. The trained responses, the muscle memory of violence. His Colt fired before Tanner could complete his draw, the bullet catching the man's gun hand and sending his weapon spinning away. The guards started to move, but Cole's second Colt swung toward them. Don't, he said simply. I've got 11 bullets left and nothing to live for except keeping that woman safe. Those aren't odds you want to play. The guards froze hands half raised. Ruby, Cole called out, never taking his eyes off the men. Come on out, girl. Ruby emerged from the shadows, running straight to her mother. She pulled out the knife Cole had given her and started cutting the ropes. Baby, Sadie gasped, tears streaming down her face. Oh, my brave girl. We're leaving now, Cole announced. Anyone follows us, anyone even thinks about retribution, and I'll come back. But next time, I won't be so generous with where I place my bullets. Tanner was on his knees, cradling his bleeding hand. This isn't over, Hartley. Judge Morrison won't stand for this. You've interfered with legal debt collection. Cole paused at the doorway, looking back. Tell the judge that William's debt is paid. Tell him his son's last wish has been honored. And tell him that if he wants to pursue this further, I've got some interesting information about his business arrangements that I'm sure the federal marshals would love to hear. He helped Sadie to her feet, her legs unsteady after hours tied to the chair. Ruby took her mother's other arm, and together they walked out of the warehouse into the night. They'd made it halfway to the cemetery when Sadie spoke. You're Cole Hartley. You danced with me once at the Harvest Festival. You remember that? I remember you were kind, she said softly, and sad even then. You carried yourself like a man who expected the world to hurt him. I was right, Cole said, but you came anyway. Despite the hurt, you came for us. They reached Tempest, who nickered softly in greeting. Cole helped Sadie onto the horse, then lifted Ruby up behind her mother. Why? Sadie asked as Cole took the reins to lead them. Why risk everything for strangers? Cole was quiet for a long moment, the only sound their footsteps and Tempest's hooves on the dirt road. Because I couldn't save them, he finally said. Margaret and Emily. I was 5 miles away when the fever took them. 5 miles. Might as well have been 5,000. By the time I got home, they were already gone, already buried. The neighbors did what they could, but... His voice broke slightly. I never got to say goodbye. Never got to tell them one last time that they were everything to me. Ruby leaned forward from her position behind her mother. They knew Mr. Cole, just like Mama knows I love her even when I can't say it. Some things don't need words. Cole looked up at the child who'd lost her father, at the woman who'd lost everything for love, and felt something shift in his chest. Not healing. He wasn't sure he'd ever truly heal, but maybe the possibility of it. "We need to get to my ranch," he said. "Tanner will lick his wounds tonight, but come morning he'll want revenge. And the judge, he's not going to let this go either." "Then what do we do?" Sadie asked. Cole's answer was simple and certain. "We get ready for a fight, but first, we get you safe. The ranch is defendable, and I've got friends who owe me favors, veterans who remember what loyalty means." As they walked through the darkness toward an uncertain future, none of them noticed the figure watching from the shadows. Judge Morrison stood in his upstairs window, looking down at the daughter he'd disowned, the granddaughter he'd never acknowledged, and the broken soldier who'd upset his carefully balanced world. His hand tightened on the telegraph form in his hand, the one he'd been about to send to the federal marshals about Tanner's operation. He'd been planning to eliminate his partner anyway. The man had gotten too greedy, too sloppy. But now he had a different problem entirely. Cole Hartley knew too much, and worse, he had nothing left to lose. That made him dangerous in ways the judge hadn't anticipated, but Morrison hadn't gotten where he was by backing down from challenges. If the broken soldier wanted a war, he'd get one, and this time there would be no mercy, no survival, no last-minute rescues. This time, Morrison would make sure everyone lost everything, just as he had the day his daughter chose love over family. The ride back to Cole's ranch stretched through the darkness, each hoofbeat marking time like a clock counting down to inevitable conflict. Sadie held tight to Ruby, who had finally given in to exhaustion and dozed against her mother's chest. Cole walked alongside Tempest, his bad legs screaming with each step, but his eyes constantly scanning the shadows for pursuit that never came. That worried him more than gunfire would have. "They're not following," Sadie observed quietly, careful not to wake Ruby. "No," Cole agreed. "That means they're planning something bigger." The ranch appeared before them like a sanctuary, the simple buildings dark against the star-filled sky. Cole had left a lamp burning in the window, an old habit from when Margaret would wait up for him. The sight of it now, with these two souls depending on him, felt like both a promise and a weight. Once inside, Cole stoked the fire while Sadie tucked Ruby into the small bed in the spare room. The child murmured something about wild flowers and Papa before settling into deeper sleep. When Sadie returned to the main room, she found Cole standing at the window watching the road. "You're expecting them tonight." "No," Cole said. "Men like Tanner and your father prefer to attack when they have every advantage. They'll wait for daylight, maybe bring the law with them to make it look legitimate." Sadie moved to stand beside him, and in the lamplight, Cole could see the bruises on her face more clearly. Without thinking, he reached out his fingers, ghosting near but not quite touching the swelling on her cheek. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have come sooner." "You came," she replied simply. "That's more than anyone else would have done." She moved to the kitchen area, automatically beginning to heat water for coffee. It was something to do with her hands, something normal in a situation that was anything but. "Tell me about William," she said suddenly. "Really tell me. Not the war story hero everyone talks about, but my brother as you knew him." Cole settled into a chair, his leg grateful for the relief. "He was terrible at cards," he said, surprising them both with something approaching a smile. "Lost every hand he ever played, but kept insisting his luck would turn. He'd give away his rations to anyone who looked hungrier than him, which was everyone according to William. And he wrote letters. God, did he write letters? To whom? You mostly. Never sent them, though. Said he didn't want you to know about the things he'd seen, the things he'd done. But he wrote anyway, telling you about the sunrise over a battlefield, about the wild flowers that grew in the places where men had died, about the dreams he had for after the war." Sadie's hand stilled on the coffee pot. What dreams? He wanted to go west. California, maybe Oregon, start fresh where the Morrison name didn't mean anything, where he could be just William, not the judge's son. He wanted to build something with his own hands, marry a girl who loved him for himself, have children who'd never know the weight of old money and older expectations. He could have had all that here, Sadie said softly. Father would have given him everything. Everything but freedom, Cole corrected. William knew the price of your father's gifts. He watched what happened to you when you refused to pay it. Sadie brought 2 cups of coffee to the table, her hands trembling slightly. I was 17 when I told Father I wanted to marry Sam Turner. Do you know what he said? Cole shook his head. He said I was born to be more than some miner's wife, that I had obligations to the family name, to the position we held. When I insisted, he gave me a choice, Sam or the family. No middle ground, no compromise. She took a sip of coffee, wincing at its heat. I chose Sam. I chose love. And for 8 years, I didn't regret it. Not once. And now Sam's dead, and our daughter is being hunted like an animal, and I wonder if my pride cost her a future. Cole leaned forward. Your courage gave her a future. You showed her that some things matter more than money or position. That's a lesson worth more than any inheritance. Before Sadie could respond, there was a sound outside. Horses moving fast. Cole was on his feet, instantly, Colt's drawn, pushing Sadie behind him. But the voice that called out wasn't Tanner's. Cole Hartley, it's Tom Sherman. Sheriff Thompson sent me. Cole relaxed fractionally, but kept his guns ready. Come into the light where I can see you. 3 riders emerged from the darkness. Tom Sherman, who'd served with Cole in the war. Sheriff Thompson himself, his badge glinting in the lamplight. And, surprisingly, impossibly, Judge Morrison. Cole kept his guns trained on them as they dismounted. This is private property, Judge. You're not welcome here. Morrison looked older than Cole remembered, the years having carved deep lines into his face. His clothes were still immaculate, his bearing still proud, but there was something different in his eyes. I'm not here as your enemy, Hartley, the judge said. I'm here because I've been a fool, and it's time to make things right. Father. Sadie had moved to the doorway, her voice a mixture of hope and disbelief. Morrison's composure cracked slightly at the sight of her. My God, what did they do to you? What you let them do, she said, ice in her voice now. What you've been letting them do to other people's daughters for years. Sheriff Thompson stepped forward. Perhaps we should continue this inside. There's much to discuss, and the night has ears. Cole slowly lowered his guns, but didn't holster them. 5 minutes, then you leave. Once inside, the 5 adults stood in an awkward circle, the weight of years and secrets heavy between them. It was Morrison who broke the silence. Tanner came to me tonight, he said. Demanded I use my influence to have you arrested for assault and theft. Said you'd stolen his rightful property. Ruby is not property, Sadie said fiercely. No, Morrison agreed. She's not. She's my granddaughter, though I've been too proud and stupid to acknowledge it. He reached into his coat, and Cole's guns came up again. Morrison froze, then slowly pulled out a leather folder. This is why I'm really here. He opened it, revealing documents, ledgers, names, and dates. Evidence, Sheriff Thompson explained. Everything we need to put Tanner away for good. The judge has been gathering it for months. Cole didn't lower his guns. Why should we believe you? Morrison's laugh was bitter. Because I'm dying, Mr. Hartley. The doctor gives me 3 months, maybe 4. Consumption, ironically enough. The same disease that nearly took Ruby when she was younger. He looked at Sadie. When I heard she'd survived it, I started watching. From a distance. Started seeing what kind of child you'd raised despite everything. You knew, Sadie whispered. You knew what Tanner was doing. I suspected, but I was making money, and I told myself it was just business. Until I saw the names. Children, some as young as 5. And then Sam started asking questions, and I realized. Morrison's voice broke. I realized I'd become the monster my own father had been, the kind of man who'd sell anything, anyone for profit. So you had Sam killed, Cole said flatly. No, Morrison said sharply. I warned him, told him to stop digging, to take his family and leave town. But Sam Turner was as stubborn as my daughter. He said he'd rather die than let another child disappear. And Tanner obliged, Sheriff Thompson added. We found the proof tonight. The men who cut those support beams have agreed to testify in exchange for leniency. Ruby's voice came from the hallway. Is it true? Did you try to save Papa? Everyone turned to see the child standing in her nightshirt, hair mussed from sleep, but eyes wide awake. Morrison dropped to his knees, bringing himself to Ruby's eye level. I tried, little one, but I was a coward. I should have done more, should have stood up to Tanner years ago. Can you forgive a foolish old man? Ruby studied him with those two wise eyes. Mama says forgiveness isn't about the person who hurt you. It's about freeing yourself from the hurt. She looked at her mother. Do you forgive him, Mama? Sadie was crying now, silent tears streaming down her bruised face. I don't know. I need time. We don't have time, Tom Sherman spoke up. Tanner's gathering men. He's planning to ride out here at dawn, burn the place down, make it look like an accident. He's got maybe 20 riders, all bought and paid for. Then we fight, Cole said simply. We don't have to, Morrison said, struggling back to his feet. I've sent for federal marshals. They'll be here by tomorrow afternoon. And I've offered a bounty of my own, $500 to any man who helps defend this ranch. By dawn, you'll have 30 men here, all veterans, all loyal to the Union cause. Cole finally holstered his guns. Why would you do that? Morrison looked at Sadie and Ruby. Because I've lost 8 years with my daughter and granddaughter. I won't lose whatever time I have left. He turned to Cole. And because William wrote to me about you, said you were the best man he'd ever known, the kind who'd do the right thing, even when it cost everything. William's dead, Cole said harshly. Yes, Morrison agreed. But his last letter, the one that arrived after the telegram about his death, he said if anything happened to him, I should look after you, that you'd need someone to remind you that life was worth living. The judge pulled out a worn envelope. He also said you'd need this someday. Cole took the letter with trembling hands. William's handwriting was unmistakable. Cole, the letter read, If you're reading this, then I didn't make it home. I'm sorry for that, sorrier than you'll ever know. But I need you to understand something. That day at Shiloh, you weren't the only one saved. I was dying inside, turning into something hard and cold like my father. Saving you, having someone to protect, reminded me what it meant to be human. You gave me purpose in my last moments. Now I'm asking you to find purpose again. Look after Sadie if she needs it. She's the only good thing our family ever produced. And if you're reading this because you're as broken as I think you'll be, remember, broken things can be mended. Sometimes they're even stronger for having been broken. Your friend, always, William. Cole had to sit down, the weight of the words too much for his bad leg to support. There's more, Morrison said quietly. Tanner doesn't know it yet, but I've bought up all his debts, every loan he's taken to fund his operation. As of tonight, he owes me everything, and I'm calling it in. By dawn, he'll be bankrupt, his men unpaid, his support gone. That'll make him desperate, Sheriff Thompson warned. A desperate man is dangerous. Good, Cole said, standing again. I prefer a straight fight to all this shadows and secrets. Morrison turned to Sadie. I know I have no right to ask, but may I stay? May I stand with you when they come? Sadie looked at Cole, then at Ruby, then back at her father. You turned your back on me when I needed you most. You let pride and position matter more than love, but... She took a shaking breath. Ruby deserves to know her grandfather, even if just for a few months. You can stay. Morrison's composure finally shattered completely. The proud judge wept like a child, and surprisingly, it was Ruby who went to him, taking his weathered hand in her small one. It's okay, grandfather, she said. We're all broken here, But Mr. Cole says broken things can still be useful. They just need to find the right purpose. Sheriff Thompson cleared his throat. The men will start arriving in a few hours. We should prepare defenses. I know where Tanner will attack from, Tom Sherman added. The east approach, where the creek bed provides cover. We should position shooters there. As the men began planning, Sadie moved to Cole's side. This is your home, your sanctuary. We've brought war to your doorstep. Cole really looked at her. In the lamplight, despite the bruises and exhaustion, she was beautiful. Not the polished beauty of her youth, but something deeper, forged by trial and loss. This stopped being a sanctuary the day Margaret and Emily died, he said. It's just been a tomb where I've been slowly burying myself. You and Ruby, you've brought life back to this place. That's worth fighting for. Their eyes met and held, and something passed between them. Not love, not yet. They were both too damaged for that. But possibility, hope, the promise that maybe after the fighting was done, they could build something new from the ashes of their old lives. Mr. Cole, Ruby had appeared at his elbow. Are you scared? Terrified, he admitted. Good, she said firmly. Papa always said courage isn't about not being scared. It's about doing what's right, despite the fear. Your papa was a wise man. He would have liked you, Ruby said. You're both broken in the same places. As the night wore on and men began arriving, veterans with haunted eyes and steady hands, the ranch transformed from a tomb into a fortress. Morrison worked alongside them, his fancy clothes soon dirty, and torn, his soft hands bleeding from stringing barbed wire. At one point, Sadie found him alone staring at the eastern horizon where dawn would soon break. I'm sorry, he said without preamble, for everything, for choosing pride over love, for letting fear of scandal matter more than your happiness, for not being there when Sam died, when you needed help. I'm sorry too, Sadie said, surprising them both, for not trying harder to make you understand, for letting my own pride keep Ruby from knowing you. We're a stubborn family, Morrison said with a weak smile. The stubbornest, Sadie agreed, but maybe that'll help us survive what's coming. As the first pale light of dawn touched the sky, they heard it. Horses, dozens of them, thunder in the distance. Tanner was coming, and he was bringing hell with him. Cole stood on the porch, his Colts ready, surrounded by men who'd answered the call. Morrison stood to his left, a rifle he barely knew how to use, clutched in his hands. Sadie was to his right, Sam's old hunting rifle steady in her grip, and Ruby safely inside but watching through the window, her small face set with determination. Whatever happens, Cole said to them all, we stand together. Together, Sadie echoed, and as Jake Tanner's riders appeared on the horizon, dark shapes against the lightning sky, Cole felt something he hadn't experienced since before the war. The sense that he was exactly where he needed to be, with people worth dying for, and more importantly, worth living for. The broken soldier, the cast-off daughter, the wise child, and the repentant judge, an unlikely family forged by circumstance, about to be tested by fire. The sun broke fully over the mountains, painting the world in gold and shadow, and the battle for their future began. The gunfire started before Tanner's men were even in range. Nervous shots from inexperienced riders who'd been promised easy money for what they thought would be simple intimidation. The bullets kicked up dust 50 yards short of the ranch, and Cole heard Tom Sherman chuckle darkly beside him. City boys and bar flies, Sherman muttered. Tanner must be scraping the bottom of the barrel. But Cole wasn't relaxing. He could see Tanner himself in the center of the group, his wounded hand wrapped in bloody bandages, his face twisted with rage that went beyond money or pride. This was personal now. Hold your fire, Cole shouted to the defenders. Let them waste their ammunition. The riders stopped just outside effective range, milling about in confusion. They had expected to ride and burn the place and ride out. They hadn't expected to find 30 armed veterans dug in behind hastily erected fortifications. Tanner rode forward alone, stopping just within shouting distance. "Hartley, send out the woman and child, and we all right away. No one else needs to die today. The only one dying today is you, if you don't turn around," Cole called back. "Look around you, soldier boy. I've got 40 men, and I've got 30 veterans who faced worse than you on an empty stomach before breakfast," Cole replied. "Plus, your men should know something. Judge Morrison has called in their debts. Every penny you've borrowed to pay them is due immediately. How long do you think they'll fight when they realize you can't pay them?" There was stirring among Tanner's riders. Several were already backing their horses away. Morrison stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of decades on the bench. "Any man who rides away now will be granted amnesty. Any who stays will be charged with attempted murder, kidnapping, and conspiracy. The federal marshals will be here within hours." More riders peeled away, maybe a dozen leaving Tanner with perhaps 25 men, the hardcore of his operation, those with too much blood on their hands to accept amnesty. "You think you've won?" Tanner screamed. "You think this changes anything? I know what you did, Morrison. I know about the girls you helped sell. We'll both hang." "Yes," Morrison said simply. "We probably will, but not before we see you buried." That's when Cole noticed something wrong. Ruby wasn't at the window anymore. He turned to tell Sadie, but she was already moving mother's instinct faster than thought. "Ruby," she called, running into the house. The back door was open, small footprints leading toward the barn. Cole's blood went cold. The barn, where someone could easily have circled around during the confrontation. "It's a distraction," he shouted, but it was too late. Smoke was already rising from the barn, and worse from the back of the house. Tanner had sent men around while keeping their attention focused forward. It was a classic military maneuver, and Cole cursed himself for not seeing it coming. "Sherman, hold the line here," Cole ordered, running toward the barn with his lurching gait. "Morrison with me." They found Ruby in the barn, trying to free the horses as smoke filled the structure. She'd seen the fire starting, and instead of calling for help, had tried to save the animals herself. "I couldn't let them burn," she cried as Cole scooped her up. "Brave girl," he said, "but foolish." Morrison was already leading the horses out, coughing in the smoke. They emerged to find the house fully ablaze. Now Sadie throwing buckets of water that might as well have been tears for all the good they did. And that's when Tanner made his real move. While everyone was distracted by the fires, he and his remaining men charged, not at the fortified positions, but at the scattered defenders trying to fight the flames. It was chaos, gunfire and smoke, screaming horses and shouting men. Cole set Ruby down behind a water trough. "Stay here!" He turned to face the charge, his Colt speaking their deadly language. The battle was brutal and close, the kind of fighting Cole had hoped never to see again. Men fell on both sides, blood soaking into dirt already darkened by smoke and ash. Through it all, Cole kept moving, kept fighting, that old training taking over, even as his bad legs screamed in protest. He saw Morrison go down, tackled by one of Tanner's men. Without thinking, Cole shot the attacker, then helped the judge to his feet. Morrison was bleeding from a gash on his forehead, but still standing. "Behind you!" Morrison shouted. Cole spun to find Tanner himself, pistol raised. Time slowed again, that familiar battlefield sensation. Cole's Colt was empty, no time to reload. This was it, the end he'd been courting for 3 years. The shot rang out, but Cole didn't fall. Tanner did his gun, spinning away. Behind him stood Sadie Sam's hunting rifle, smoking in her hands. "No one," she said fiercely, "threatens my family." The word family hung in the air like a benediction. In that moment, in the midst of fire and gun smoke, something fundamental shifted. They weren't just people brought together by circumstance anymore. They were choosing each other. With Tanner down, his remaining men scattered. The fires were brought under control, though the house was badly damaged, and the barn was a total loss. As the smoke cleared, they took stock. 3 defenders dead, 7 wounded, including Morrison. Of Tanner's men, 8 were dead, several wounded, and Tanner himself was clinging to life with Sadie's bullet in his chest. Sheriff Thompson, who'd arrived with reinforcements just as the battle ended, knelt beside Tanner. "Anything you want to say?" "For the record," Tanner's laugh was bloody. "Morrison, he's as guilty as me. We're all guilty. Every damn one of us who looked away while girls disappeared." "I know," Thompson said quietly, "and justice will be done. For everyone." Tanner's eyes found Cole. You think you've saved them? You can't save anyone. You couldn't even save your own family." Cole knelt beside the dying man, his voice low but clear. "No, I couldn't save them, but I can save these ones. And that's enough." Tanner died with a curse on his lips, and Cole felt nothing but relief. As the sun climbed higher, revealing the full extent of the damage, the federal marshals finally arrived. They took statements, arrested several of Tanner's surviving men, and had a long private conversation with Judge Morrison. Cole found the judge afterward sitting on what was left of the porch steps, looking older than his years. "They're giving me a choice," Morrison said. "Stand trial and likely hang, or sign over everything I own to a trust for Sadie and Ruby, then disappear, leave the territory, and never return." "What will you do?" Morrison looked at his daughter and granddaughter working alongside the veterans to clear debris. "What would you do if you had a chance to give them a future free from the shadow of your sins?" Cole didn't need to answer. They both knew. That evening, as the helpers departed and quiet settled over the damaged ranch, the 4 of them gathered in the one room of the house that had survived intact. Ruby was curled against her mother, exhausted from the day's terrors and triumphs. Morrison sat apart, already a ghost of the man he'd been. "I'll leave in the morning," he said. "The papers are already drawn up. Everything I have becomes yours, Sadie. The house in town, the investments, all of it." "I don't want your money," Sadie said. "But Ruby deserves it," Morrison countered. "It's not charity, it's justice. Payment for 8 years of abandonment." Cole cleared his throat. "There's another way." They all looked at him. "Marry me," he said to Sadie, the words coming out more abruptly than he'd intended. "Not for love, not yet, but for protection. For Ruby. A married woman has more legal standing, more respectability, and this ranch needs rebuilding. We could do it together." Sadie stared at him. "You barely know me. I know you chose love over money. I know you'd die for your daughter. I know you're brave enough to stand against the world when needed." Cole's voice softened. "And I know you make this place feel less like a tomb and more like a home. You're proposing a business arrangement. I'm proposing a partnership," Cole corrected. "Maybe it becomes more, maybe it doesn't. But Ruby needs a father, you need security, and I need a reason to keep living that isn't just habit." Ruby sat up, looking between them with those 2 wise eyes. "You should say yes, Mama." "Ruby, he's good," the child said simply. "He came for us when no one else would. He stood against evil men. And he's broken in the same places we are, which means we fit together." Morrison stood slowly. "I'll stay for the wedding if you'll have me. One good memory to carry into exile." Sadie looked at her father, at her daughter, at the damaged ranch that could be rebuilt, and finally at Cole, the broken soldier who'd offered them sanctuary and asked nothing in return until now. "3 conditions," she said. Cole nodded for her to continue. "First, Ruby gets to choose her own path when she's grown, no matter what that is. Second, we rebuild this place together, equal partners in all decisions. And third," she paused, gathering courage, "we're honest with each other, always. No secrets, no lies, no pretending we're something we're not." "Agreed," Cole said immediately. "Then yes." Sadie said, her voice stronger. "Yes, I'll marry you, Cole Hartley. Not for love, not yet as you said, but for hope. For the possibility that broken people can build something whole." Ruby cheered and threw herself at Cole, who caught her startled. "Does this mean I can call you Papa?" Cole looked at Sadie over the child's head, saw her nod slightly, and felt something crack in his chest, not breaking, but breaking open. "If you want to," he said roughly. "I want to," Ruby said firmly. "Papa Cole, it sounds right." Morrison cleared his throat. "I'll speak to Reverend Mills. Would tomorrow be too soon?" "Tomorrow's perfect," Cole said, not taking his eyes off Sadie. "We've all waited long enough for a second chance." That night, as they prepared for a wedding, none of them had expected the ranch felt different. The physical damage was still there, charred walls and broken windows, but something had fundamentally changed. Death had come calling and been turned away. Hatred had tried to destroy them and failed. In the morning, Judge Morrison would perform his last official act, marrying his daughter to a man he'd once have considered beneath her. Then he'd disappear into the West, carrying his sins and his regrets. Sheriff Thompson would file reports that carefully omitted certain details, ensuring Sadie and Ruby were protected from any legal consequences of Morrison's crimes. And Cole Hartley, who'd thought his life ended with Margaret and Emily, would speak vows to a woman he barely knew but deeply respected, while a 7-year-old girl who'd lost one father and found another looked on with joy. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was better. It was real people choosing to build something from ruins, to forge family from friendship, to find hope in the ashes of their former lives. The wedding would be simple, a few words spoken over joined hands, witnessed by those who'd fought beside them. But the promise would be profound, to stand together against whatever came to heal what could be healed, to accept what couldn't, and to never let the past define their future. As Cole stood in the doorway of the damaged house, looking out at the stars, Sadie joined him. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. "I haven't been sure about anything since the war," he admitted. "But this feels right. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," she said, slipping her hand into his. It was the first time they'd touched by choice, and both felt the spark of possibility. "We're going to make mistakes," Sadie warned. "Undoubtedly." "Ruby's going to test boundaries." "I'd expect nothing less." "And we're both carrying ghosts that won't easily rest." Cole squeezed her hand gently. "Then we'll be haunted together. Seems better than being haunted alone." They stood there, two broken people on the edge of a tremendous decision, while inside Ruby sang softly to herself, a lullaby her father used to sing now, given new life in a new home. Tomorrow they would speak vows. Tomorrow they would become a family in the eyes of law and God. But tonight, in this quiet moment under the stars, they'd already begun. The wedding was nothing like Sadie's first one. No white dress, no church bells, no crowd of well-wishers. Just her in a borrowed blue dress from Mrs. Sherman Cole, in his lease-patched shirt, and Ruby scattering wildflowers she'd picked at dawn. Judge Morrison performed the ceremony with tears running unchecked down his face, his voice breaking when he pronounced them husband and wife. "You may kiss your bride," Morrison said, then caught himself. "That is, if you wish to." Cole and Sadie looked at each other, both suddenly shy as teenagers. It was Ruby who broke the tension. "Oh, for heaven's sake," she said with exasperation beyond her years. "It doesn't have to be a real kiss, just something to seal the promise." Cole leaned forward and pressed his lips gently to Sadie's forehead, a gesture somehow more intimate than any passionate embrace. "Welcome home, Mrs. Hartley," he whispered. Morrison left that afternoon a single carpet bag holding what remained of his life. He hugged Ruby fiercely, whispered something to Sadie that made her cry, and shook Cole's hand with surprising strength. "Take care of them," he said. "With my life," Cole replied. They watched Morrison's carriage disappear into the distance, and then it was just the three of them standing before a half-burned house that was now officially their home. "Well," Sadie said, squaring her shoulders, "I suppose we should start rebuilding." The first week was harder than any of them expected. Not the physical work. That was just sweat and splinters. It was learning to live together, three damaged souls trying to create something normal from decidedly abnormal circumstances. Cole woke every morning at dawn, soldier's habits, dying hard, only to find Sadie already up, making coffee with the quiet efficiency of someone used to managing on little. They'd work side by side in awkward silence until Ruby woke, and then the child's chatter would fill the spaces between them like mortar between bricks. "Papa Cole, why do you walk funny?" Ruby asked on the third day, as direct as only children could be. "Ruby." Sadie scolded, but Cole held up a hand. "It's all right. She should know." He sat on a salvaged crate, extending his bad leg. "Took some metal here during the war. The doctors wanted to cut it off, but I was stubborn. Kept it, but it never worked quite right again." Ruby studied the leg with serious consideration. "Does it hurt?" "Every day." "But you still walk?" "Every day." Ruby nodded as if this made perfect sense. "Mama says the best things in life usually hurt a little. Like when she had to leave grandfather's house to marry Papa. It hurt, but it was worth it." Cole looked at Sadie, who was suddenly very interested in the board she was measuring. "Your mama's a wise woman." That night, after Ruby was asleep, Cole found Sadie sitting on the porch steps looking at the stars. He lowered himself beside her, his bad leg protesting. "She asks hard questions," he said. "She always has. Sam used to say she was born with an old soul and a young heart." Sadie pulled her shawl tighter. "I'm sorry if she makes you uncomfortable." "She doesn't. It's just Emily never got old enough to ask questions like that." She was still in the stage where every answer was magic. Cole picked up a piece of charred wood, turning it in his hands. "Sometimes Ruby reminds me of her. Sometimes she reminds me of everything Emily never got to be." "Is that painful?" "Yes," Cole said simply, "but it's a good pain. Like stretching a muscle that's been still too long." They sat in comfortable silence until Sadie spoke again. "I know this isn't a real marriage. Not yet. But I want you to know I'm grateful for everything." Cole was quiet for a long moment. "My grandmother used to say that the best marriages weren't the ones that started with fireworks. They were the ones that started with friendship and built from there." "Were your grandparents happy?" 60 years together, fought like cats and dogs sometimes, but never went to bed angry." Cole tossed the charred wood aside. "I don't know if we'll have 60 years or even 6, but I'd like to try for happy." "I'd like that too," Sadie said softly. The second week brought unexpected challenges. Tom Sherman arrived with donated lumber from the town, but also with news. "People are talking," he said, unloading planks. "Some say it's unseemly you two marrying so quick after Tanner's death. Others say Sadie's bewitched you somehow." "Let them talk," Cole said, but Sadie's face had gone pale. That afternoon, she tried to go to the general store for supplies. Mrs. Henderson, who'd always been cordial before, turned her back. Mr. Garrett served her, but wouldn't meet her eyes. And worst of all, she heard Jenny Patterson, once her childhood friend, whisper to another woman, "She always did think she was better than us. Now look at her married to a crippled hermit living in a burned-out ranch." Sadie returned home with the supplies, but also with red-rimmed eyes. Cole noticed immediately. "What happened?" "Nothing. Just people being people." But Ruby, who'd been playing nearby, had sharper ears than they realized. "They were mean to Mama," she announced. "I heard Mrs. Patterson say ugly things." Cole's jaw tightened. "Did she now?" "It doesn't matter," Sadie said quickly. "We knew there would be talk. Talk is one thing. Cruelty is another." Cole grabbed his hat. "I'll be back." "Cole don't—" But he was already heading for the wagon. He returned 2 hours later with something unexpected, an invitation. "The church social is Saturday," he said, placing the paper on the table. "We're going." "Cole, we can't. They don't want us there." "Which is exactly why we're going." His eyes were steel. "We hide out here. We let them make us into whatever story they want. We show up heads high, and we remind them we're their neighbors." "They'll be horrible." Some will. Others might surprise you. Cole looked at Ruby, who was listening intently. Besides, Ruby deserves to know other children. She can't grow up isolated because adults are petty. Saturday came too quickly. Sadie wore her best remaining dress. Cole forced his leg into his dress boots despite the pain, and Ruby wore a new dress Cole had somehow procured, yellow with tiny blue flowers. "You look beautiful, Mama," Ruby said. "So do you, sweetheart." "Papa Cole looks handsome too," Ruby added loudly, making Cole's ears turn red. The church social was held in the field behind the building tables, groaning with food, children running between the adults' legs. When the Hartley family arrived, conversation stopped. The silence stretched uncomfortable and hostile. Then Sheriff Thompson's wife, Martha, a woman known for her iron spine and kind heart, walked directly to them. "Sadie Hartley," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "That dress is lovely. And Ruby. My goodness, how you've grown. There are some children your age by the swing. Would you like to meet them?" The ice didn't break entirely, but it cracked. Some families followed Martha's lead, offering cautious greetings. Others maintained their cold distance. But it was progress. Cole stayed close to Sadie's side, his presence a silent warning to anyone who might offer insult. When Harold Briggs made a snide comment about fallen women, Cole simply stared at him until the man mumbled an excuse and slunk away. The real test came when Jenny Patterson approached her face, a mixture of emotions. "Sadie," she said stiffly. "Jenny." They looked at each other, years of friendship and hurt between them. "I heard what you said," Sadie said quietly, "about me marrying a crippled hermit." Jenny flushed. I was angry. You left us all behind for Sam Turner. Then you come back and—" She gestured helplessly. "Cole Hartley. Really. He saved us," Sadie said simply, "when no one else would." Jenny studied Cole, who was pretending not to listen while watching Ruby play. "He seems different than before, less dead behind the eyes." "We're all less dead now," Sadie said. "That's what happens when you choose to live again." The conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the swings. Ruby was standing nose to nose with a boy twice her size, her small fists clenched. "Take it back," she demanded. "Why should I? Everyone knows your mama's a—" He never finished. Ruby's fist connected with his nose, sending him sprawling. Blood spurted, and the boy started wailing. Cole reached them first, scooping Ruby up as angry parents converged. "Your daughter is a savage," the boy's mother shrieked. "Your son is a bully," Cole replied calmly. "And if he speaks that way about women, he learned it at home." "How dare you?" "I dare because it's true." Cole's voice carried now, reaching the entire gathering. "You all want to whisper about my wife, fine, but teach your children to do the same, and they'll answer to Ruby. And if Ruby can't handle it, they'll answer to me." "You're threatening children," someone gasped. "I'm promising consequences for cruelty," Cole corrected, something this town seems to have forgotten about. He turned to leave Ruby still in his arms, Sadie beside him, but then Ruby squirmed to be put down. "Wait," she said, marching back to the bleeding boy. "I'm sorry I hit you. Violence is wrong, but so are ugly words about people's mothers. Maybe we can both do better." She offered her small hand. The boy, shocked, took it. As they rode home, Ruby wedged between her parents on the wagon seat. Sadie said, "You know we'll have to face them again." "Every week if necessary," Cole agreed. "It'll be hard. Everything worth doing is." Ruby looked up at them. "Are we a real family now?" Cole and Sadie exchanged glances over her head. "What makes a family real?" Sadie asked. Ruby considered this seriously. "When you fight for each other, when you come home to each other even when the world is mean, when you choose each other even when it's hard." "Then yes," Cole said, his voice rough. "We're a real family." The third week brought a different kind of challenge. The rebuilt barn was finally ready for animals, and Cole decided it was time to buy horses. He took Ruby with him to the stock auction, leaving Sadie to work on the house. "Why just me and you?" Ruby asked as they rode. Sometimes a man needs to teach his daughter about horses. Cole said the word daughter, still feeling foreign, but right on his tongue. At the auction, Cole let Ruby help choose. She had a good eye picking a mare with spirit, but not meanness intelligence clear in her dark eyes. "What'll you name her?" Cole asked. "Hope," Ruby said immediately, "because that's what she is." On the ride home, Ruby was quiet for a long time before speaking. "Papa Cole, do you miss them? Your first family." Cole's hands tightened on the reins. "Every day." "Does having us make it hurt less or more?" Cole thought about lying about giving her an easy answer, but they'd promised honesty. "Both," he said. "It hurts more because you remind me what I lost, but it hurts less because you remind me what I can still have." "Mama cries sometimes," Ruby confided. "At night when she thinks I'm asleep, I think she misses Papa." "That's natural. She loved him very much." "Do you think she'll ever love you?" Cole was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know, but I hope she'll let me earn the chance to find out." When they arrived home with the new mare, they found Sadie had transformed the main room. New curtains hung at the windows, a rag rug covered the floor, and she'd somehow procured a rocking chair that sat by the fireplace. "It's starting to look like a home," she said almost shyly. "It's perfect," Cole said, meaning it. That night, after Ruby was asleep, Cole found Sadie in the rocking chair, sewing by lamplight. Without thinking, he reached out and touched a curl that had escaped her bun. She went very still, but didn't pull away. "I'm trying," he said softly, "to be what you both need." "You already are," she replied, catching his hand. "Cole, I need to tell you something. About Sam. About why I'm not ready for—" "You don't owe me explanations." "But I do. We promised honesty." She took a breath. "Sam was my whole world. When he died, I thought I'd never feel anything again. Then you saved us, and I'm terrified, because I'm starting to feel things I thought were dead, and I don't know if I'm betraying Sam's memory or honoring it by moving forward." Cole knelt beside the chair, his bad leg protesting, bringing him to eye level with her. "You're honoring it. Sam would want you happy. Any man who loved you that much would want you to find happiness again. How do you know? Because if I die tomorrow, I'd want you to find someone who'd take care of you and Ruby, someone who'd see your strength and your kindness and count themselves lucky to share your life." Sadie's eyes filled with tears. "You really mean that?" "Every word." She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. They stayed that way, sharing breath and space, until Cole's leg demanded he stand. The fourth week brought the autumn harvest season, and with it, an unexpected opportunity for acceptance. The miller's barn had caught fire, not maliciously, just bad luck with a lantern. The family stood to lose their entire harvest without somewhere to store it. "We have room," Cole said when he heard the news. "They weren't kind to us at the social," Sadie reminded him. "No, but Ruby's watching. What do we teach her? That kindness is only for those who are kind to us." So they offered their newly rebuilt barn, and the millers, desperate, accepted. What followed was a community barn raising in reverse, everyone coming together to bring in the harvest. Even those who'd been coldest to them couldn't maintain their hostility while working side by side. Ruby worked alongside the other children her earlier fight with the Patterson boy, forgotten in the excitement of the harvest. Sadie found herself laughing with women who'd shunned her weeks before. And Cole, despite his leg, worked harder than any two men, earning grudging respect. As the sun set on the final day of harvest, the barn full, and the miller's grateful Jenny Patterson approached Sadie again. "I was wrong," she said simply. "About you, about Cole, about all of it. You chose love with Sam, and now you're choosing survival and hope with Cole. That's not falling. That's rising." That night, the three of them sat on their porch watching the stars come out. Ruby was teaching Cole a song Sam used to sing, her voice sweet and clear. Sadie watched them, her heart full of something she couldn't quite name. "What are you thinking?" Cole asked, noticing her silence. That maybe broken things really can be mended, she said. That maybe they really are stronger for having been broken. Cole reached over and took her hand, intertwining their fingers. It was such a simple gesture, but it felt like a promise. "We're building something good here," he said. "Yes," Sadie agreed, squeezing his hand. "We are." As autumn painted the world in gold and crimson, the Hartley family settled into their new life. The house was repaired, the barn full, the fields ready for winter. They'd faced the town's judgment and found unexpected allies. They'd navigated the awkwardness of strangers becoming family and discovered that sometimes the families we choose are stronger than the ones we're born into. There were still challenges ahead. Winter would test their preparations. The town's acceptance was fragile and conditional, and the three of them were still learning how to be what each other needed. But as Ruby fell asleep between them on the porch, her head on Cole's shoulder and her hand in Sadie's, something fundamental had shifted. They were no longer three broken people taking shelter together. They were a family, imperfect and patched together, but solid as the rebuilt house that sheltered them. "Thank you," Sadie whispered across Ruby's sleeping form. "For what?" "For giving us a chance to heal." Cole looked at her in the starlight. This woman who'd lost everything and still stood strong and felt his heart do something it hadn't done in 3 years. It hoped. "Thank you," he replied, "for giving me a reason to." The first season of their life together was ending, but their story was just beginning. And for the first time since their losses, all three of them believed in tomorrow. Winter came early that year, November snow falling like a white curtain across the Missouri frontier. Cole stood at the window, watching it accumulate, his bad leg already aching with the cold that would be his companion for the next 4 months. Behind him, Sadie worked at preserving the last of the autumn vegetables, while Ruby practiced her letters at the kitchen table, tongue poking out in concentration. P-A-P-A, Ruby spelled out loud. "Papa. That's you, Papa Cole." "That's right, little one," Cole said, turning from the window. "You're getting better every day." "Mama's teaching me to read the Bible," Ruby announced. "She says education is the one thing nobody can take from you." "Your mama's right as usual," Cole said, catching Sadie's eye. She smiled, that soft expression that had been appearing more often lately. A knock at the door interrupted the peaceful morning. Cole opened it to find Sheriff Thompson Snow, already thick on his shoulders. "Tom," Cole greeted him. "Something wrong?" "Afraid so. The Hendersons' youngest boy, William. He's gone missing. Wandered off this morning, and with this snow." Thompson's face was grim. "We're organizing search parties." Cole was already reaching for his coat. "How old?" 4. "Same age as—" Thompson stopped realizing what he'd almost said. "Same age as Emily when she died." "I'll help," Cole said firmly. "Sadie, can you go?" she said immediately. "Ruby and I will prepare hot food and blankets for when you bring him back." The way she said when, not if, strengthened something in Cole's chest. The search was brutal. Snow fell heavier by the hour, covering any tracks the boy might have left. Cole's legs screamed with each step, but he pushed through, remembering another child, another time when he'd been too late. "Not this time," he muttered to himself, pushing through a drift. It was nearly dark when they found him. Little William Henderson huddled in the hollow of a dead tree, lips blue but breathing. Cole pulled off his own coat, wrapping the child, holding him close, as they struggled back through the snow. Mrs. Henderson wept when they brought her son home. "Thank you," she sobbed, clutching Cole's hands. "I was so cruel to your family at the social, and still you—" "We're neighbors," Cole said simply. "That's what neighbors do." The rescue changed something in the town's attitude. When Cole entered the general store, now people nodded respectfully. When Sadie walked Ruby to the schoolhouse that had finally opened, other mothers included her in their conversations. They weren't fully accepted yet, but the ice was thawing. December brought an unexpected visitor. Cole was in the barn teaching Ruby how to care for the horses when a fancy carriage pulled up. A well-dressed woman emerged, her bearing regal despite her age. "I'm looking for Sadie Morrison," she announced. "I mean Sadie Hartley." Cole stepped forward, Ruby peeking out from behind him. "I'm her husband, and you are Constance Morrison, Sadie's aunt." The woman's eyes were sharp, evaluating. "I've come from Boston." Inside with tea served and Ruby sent to play in her room, Constance explained her presence. "I received a letter from my brother before he left. He told me everything. About his crimes, about Sadie's marriage to you, about Ruby." She set down her teacup with precise movements. "I've come to make amends." Sadie sat rigid beside Cole. "We don't need Morrison money." "It's not about money, child," Constance said gently. "It's about family. You're all I have left. My husband died last year. We had no children. I've spent months traveling to find you." "Why?" Sadie's voice was hard. "You never reached out when Father disowned me." "Because I was a coward," Constance admitted. "I let my brother's pride dictate my actions. But I'm here now if you'll have me." Cole felt Sadie's hand seek his under the table. He squeezed it, offering silent support. "You can stay for a visit," Sadie said finally. "We'll see how it goes." Constance proved to be nothing like her brother. She rolled up her silk sleeves to help with chores, told Ruby stories of Sadie as a child, and treated Cole with genuine respect. One evening, she pulled him aside. "You're not what I expected," she said. "What did you expect? Someone taking advantage of a desperate woman. Instead, I find a man who looks at my niece like she hung the stars, who's teaching her daughter to be strong and kind, who's building a real home here." "We're building it together," Cole corrected. "Yes," Constance smiled. "I can see that." Her visit stretched from days to weeks. She was there when the December blizzard trapped them inside for 3 days, telling stories by the fire while the wind howled. She was there when Ruby came down with a fever, helping Sadie nurse her through it with herbs and prayers. She was there when Cole's leg gave out completely one morning and he couldn't hide the pain anymore. "You need to see a doctor," Constance said firmly. "Doctors can't do anything more than they already have," Cole replied through gritted teeth. But Constance had connections. She sent for a specialist from St. Louis, paying for his travel, despite Cole's protests. The doctor examined the old wound with new techniques learned from European colleagues. "The shrapnel was removed incorrectly," he announced. "There are still fragments pressing on the nerves. I can operate, but it's risky." "How risky?" Sadie asked, her face pale. "He could lose the leg, or he could walk without pain for the first time in years." Cole looked at his wife, at Ruby, hovering in the doorway, at this family he'd built from ashes. "Do it," he said. The surgery was performed on the kitchen table, Sadie holding Cole's hand, while Constance kept Ruby distracted outside. The doctor worked for 2 hours, removing 3 pieces of metal that had been slowly poisoning Cole's body for years. Recovery was slow. Cole, used to pushing through pain, had to learn patience. Sadie tended him with gentle efficiency, and Ruby read to him from her primer, sounding out each word with determination. "You're going to walk proper now," Ruby announced one day. "No more limping." "We don't know that yet," Cole cautioned. "I do," Ruby said with the confidence of childhood. "I prayed on it, and God told me you'd be healed. Not all the way. You'll still have aches when it rains, but enough." She was right. By January, Cole was walking with only a slight hitch in his step. The constant grinding pain was gone, replaced by manageable discomfort. The first time he walked from the house to the barn without stopping, Sadie cried. "They're happy tears," she assured him, wiping her eyes. I've never seen you without pain in your face." January also brought news from California. A letter arrived, water-stained and travel-worn, addressed to Sadie in her father's hand. "He made it," she said, reading. "He's working as a clerk in a mining office. He says he's found a kind of peace in anonymity." "Will you write back?" Cole asked. "I don't know. Maybe. Someday." She folded the letter carefully. "He's Ruby's grandfather, whatever else he is." The town had fully embraced them by then, especially after Cole helped pull the miller's wagon out of a snowdrift, and Sadie nursed the Patterson children through scarlet fever. Jenny Patterson, once Sadie's harshest critic, now came for tea twice a week. "I was jealous," Jenny admitted one afternoon. "You had the courage to choose love to leave everything behind for Sam. I married who I was supposed to marry, and while I've grown to care for my husband, I've always wondered what it would be like to choose." "It's terrifying," Sadie said honestly, "but it's also freedom." February brought Valentine's Day, a holiday Cole had forgotten existed until Ruby reminded him. "You have to do something romantic for Mama," she insisted. "That's what husbands do." "Ruby, your mom and I, we're not—" Cole struggled for words. "You're not what in love," Ruby crossed her arms. "Papa Cole, I'm 7, not stupid. I see how you look at each other. I see how Mama smiles now. I see how you reach for each other without thinking." Cole stared at the child, this wise soul in a small body. "When did you get so smart?" "Mama says I was born that way." Now about Valentine's Day. With Ruby and Constance's help, Cole planned something simple but meaningful. He carved a wooden heart from pine, sanding it smooth and inscribing it with words, "For Sadie, who taught a dead man to live again." When he gave it to her that evening, after a dinner, Constance and Ruby had conspicuously disappeared from Sadie held it like it was made of gold. "Cole," she whispered. "I know we married for practical reasons," he said, his voice rough. "But somewhere along the way, that is, you've become—" She stopped his words with a kiss. Not the brief, careful touches they'd shared before, but something real and deep and full of promise. "I love you too," she said against his lips. "I didn't mean to. I thought I'd never love again after Sam. But you snuck into my heart when I wasn't looking. Is that okay? Loving again. Sam would want me happy," she said, echoing Cole's own words from months before. "And you, Cole Hartley, make me happy." They were interrupted by Ruby's cheer from the hallway. Finally, Aunt Constance, they finally kissed proper. March arrived with unseasonable warmth, melting the snow and revealing the earth beneath. Constance announced she'd be leaving soon, returning to Boston to settle her affairs. "But I'll be back," she promised. "This is more family than I've had in years." The night before she left, she gave them a gift, a daguerreotype she'd had taken in town of the 4 of them together. In it, Cole stood tall despite his healing leg, Sadie beside him with quiet strength, Ruby in front grinning widely, and Constance to the side, her usual stern expression softened by affection. "For when you need to remember that families come in all shapes," she said. Her departure left a quietness in the house, but not an empty one. The 3 of them had learned to fill spaces with their own rhythm. One evening, as spring crept closer, Ruby made an announcement at dinner. "I want a brother or sister." Sadie choked on her coffee. Cole dropped his fork. "Ruby," Sadie gasped. "What other families have lots of children? Why can't we—" Cole and Sadie looked at each other across the table, a conversation happening without words. "These things take time," Sadie said carefully, "and they're not always possible." Cole added, thinking of the years he and Margaret had tried after Emily. "But you'll try," Ruby pressed. "Ruby Morrison Hartley," Sadie said firmly. "That is quite enough." But later, as they prepared for bed in the room they now truly shared, Sadie said quietly, "Would you want the more children?" Cole pulled her close. "I want whatever you want. If it happens, wonderful. If it doesn't, what we have is already more than I ever dreamed of having again." April brought the spring revival at church, a week of services and socials. The Hartleys attended every night, fully part of the community now. On the last night, Reverend Mills asked if anyone had a testimony to share. Cole surprised everyone, including himself, by standing. "A year ago, I was a dead man walking," he said, his voice carrying through the packed church. "I'd lost my family, my purpose, my will to live. Then God sent me an unlikely angel, a 7-year-old girl running through a storm seeking help for her mama. He looked at Ruby and Sadie both watching him with tears in their eyes. That little girl and her mama saved me. They gave me reason to fight again, to build again, to love again. I know some of you whispered about our quick marriage, about propriety and appearances. But sometimes God doesn't care about propriety. Sometimes he just puts broken people together and says, heal each other. That's what we've done. That's what we're doing. And I thank him every day for the storm that brought them to my door. He sat down to thunderous applause, and Ruby launched herself into his arms. That was beautiful, Papa, she whispered. It was true, he whispered back. May arrived with wildflowers and new life everywhere. The ranch was thriving, the community connections strong, and the family solid. But life had one more test for them. Jake Tanner's brother Marcus arrived from Texas. Unlike Jake, Marcus was cold, calculating, and patient. He'd spent months planning his revenge for his brother's death. He didn't come with guns blazing. He came with papers. Legal documents suggesting Cole had stolen land, that the marriage wasn't valid, that Ruby was still legally bound to her father's debts. It's all lies, Sheriff Thompson said, reviewing the papers. But they're good forgeries. It'll take time to disprove them. Time we don't have, Cole said. He's trying to destroy us with paper instead of bullets. It was Constance who saved them. She delayed her return to Boston, sensing trouble, and her connections proved invaluable. She brought in lawyers from St. Louis, investigators who uncovered Marcus Tanner's own criminal past, and most importantly, original documents proving Cole's ownership of the ranch and the validity of the marriage. The final confrontation happened in the courthouse. Marcus Tanner, so sure of his victory, watched his case crumble as witness after witness testified to Cole's character, to the family's place in the community. But the killing blow came from an unexpected source. Judge Morrison appeared escorted by federal marshals. He'd returned to testify, knowing it meant his arrest. Every document Mr. Tanner has presented is forged, Morrison stated. I know because he tried to involve me in the scheme months ago. I refused and warned him to stay away from my daughter and her family. You'll hang for your crimes, Marcus snarled. Perhaps, Morrison said calmly, but my granddaughter will be free. That's all that matters. The case was dismissed. Marcus Tanner was arrested for forgery and conspiracy. And Judge Morrison was led away in chains, but not before Ruby ran to him, throwing her arms around his waist. I love you, grandfather, she said. And I love you, little flower. Be good, be strong, be happy. As they watched him leave, Sadie wept in Cole's arms. He came back. Despite everything, he came back. He's your father, Cole said simply. Whatever else he is, he loves you and Ruby. That evening, the entire town gathered at the ranch for a celebration that turned into an impromptu barn dance. Cole, his leg finally strong enough, danced with Sadie to the same fiddle music that had brought her and Sam together years before. Full circle, she murmured against his chest. No, Cole corrected. Not a circle, a spiral. We're in a different place now, higher up, able to see further. Ruby danced between them, laughing as they spun her around. The community that had once shunned them now embraced them fully. The family that had been broken was now whole, if different than before. As the evening wound down, Sheriff Thompson pulled Cole aside. There's talk of making you deputy sheriff, he said. Town needs good men, and you've proven yourself 10 times over. Cole looked at his wife and daughter dancing with the other families, fully accepted, fully belonging. I'll think about it, he said. But right now, I'm just a rancher and a family man. That's enough. More than enough, Thompson agreed. As spring gave way to summer, the Hartley Ranch stood as testament to resurrection. The buildings rebuilt from ashes, the fields green with new growth, the family forged from loss and found in love. Cole's limp was barely noticeable now. Sadie's smile came easily and often. And Ruby grew taller and stronger, secure in the knowledge that she was loved, protected, and home. They'd been tested by fire, by law, by community judgment, and by their own fears. They'd passed every test, not perfectly, but together. And together, they were unbreakable. The drought started in June, innocent enough at first, just a few weeks without rain that had folks commenting on the fine weather for having. By July, the comments had turned to worried murmurs. By August, when the corn should have been tall and green, the fields looked like armies of brown skeletons rattling in the hot wind. Cole stood at the edge of his withering wheat field, handful of crumbling soil sifting through his fingers like sand. The sky above was brass, not a cloud in sight, hadn't been for 43 days. "Papa Cole!" Ruby's voice came from behind him. She was 8 now, taller, her face losing its baby roundness. "Mama says to come in. It's too hot to be standing in the sun." He turned to look at her, this child who'd become his daughter in every way that mattered. She was carrying a bucket of water from the well, and he could see how carefully she walked, not spilling a drop. They'd all learned not to waste water. "How's your mama feeling?" he asked, falling into step beside her. "Tired. The heat's making her sick again this morning." Cole's jaw tightened. Sadie was 3 months pregnant, a miracle they'd celebrated in the spring when rain still fell and the world made sense. Now, with the drought strangling everything, the timing seemed cruel. Inside the house, Sadie sat by the window, fanning herself with an old newspaper. Her face was pale beads of sweat on her forehead despite the early hour. "You should be lying down," Cole said, kissing her forehead. "I can't just lie about while everything dies around us," she replied, but her protest was weak. "The wheat's gone," Cole said quietly. "Maybe 20% salvageable, if that." Sadie closed her eyes. "The Hendersons, worse off than us. They put everything into corn this year." Cole sat heavily in his chair, his leg aching the way it did when the weather was about to change. But the weather hadn't changed in weeks. A knock at the door interrupted the heavy silence. Sheriff Thompson stood there, his face grim under the coating of dust. "Cole, we need to talk. Town meeting tonight. This drought, it's bringing out the worst in people." "What kind of worst?" Thompson glanced at Ruby, then back at Cole. "The kind that looks for someone to blame. There's been talk." "What talk?" Sadie asked, though her face suggested she already knew. "Some folks are saying it's divine punishment, that the town's been cursed since—" Thompson struggled for words. "Since we accepted certain people back into the community." "You mean since you accepted us?" Cole said flatly. "That's the shape of it, yes. It's mostly the Crowley clan stirring things up, but scared people listen to foolish talk. Old man Crowley had arrived in town 6 months back, with his 3 sons and their families buying up the abandoned Tanner property. They were the kind of Christians who found sin everywhere except in their own mirrors." "Let them talk," Cole said. "It's gone beyond talk," Thompson said. "They're saying if you leave, voluntarily or otherwise, the rain will come back." Ruby stepped forward, her small face fierce. "That stupid weather doesn't care about people." "You're right, little one," Thompson said. "But fear makes people stupid." That night's town meeting was held in the church, the only building big enough to hold everyone. The windows were open, but no breeze came through. The air sat heavy and still as a held breath. Cole and Sadie entered with Ruby between them, backs straight, heads high. The crowd parted, some with sympathetic looks, others with suspicion. The Crowleys sat in a block near the front, radiating righteous satisfaction. Reverend Mills called for order. "We're here to discuss the drought and what measures." "We all know why we're here." Josiah Crowley stood, his voice booming. "This town has strayed from righteousness, harboring women of loose morals, murderers, and their spawn." "Watch your tongue," Cole said, his voice deadly quiet. "Or what you'll shoot me like your wife shot Jake Tanner." "Jake Tanner was a slaver and a murderer," Martha Thompson said loudly. "Sadie Hartley saved her family. That's what any good mother would do." A good mother wouldn't have put her family in that position to begin with. Crowley's wife added her vinegar voice, cutting through the room. Enough, Reverend Mills commanded. We're not here to relitigate the past. We're here to address the drought. The drought is God's judgment, Crowley insisted. Look at the facts. Everything was fine until these people were accepted back. Then Judge Morrison's corruption was revealed, violence came to our streets, and now the very heavens withhold their bounty. You want facts. Cole stood slowly, his presence commanding attention. Here are facts. Droughts happen. They've happened before any of us were born, and they'll happen after we're gone. In 23, before I was even born, this whole region went dry for 6 months. In 41, same thing. Was God punishing someone then too? Don't you dare lecture us about God, Crowley snarled. You who couldn't even protect your first family. The church went dead silent. Even Crowley supporters looked uncomfortable. Cole's hands clenched into fists, but before he could respond, Ruby stood on her pew. My papa protected us, she shouted. He saved Mama and me when nobody else would. And if God's mad at anyone, it's probably at people like you who use his name to be mean. Control your child, Mrs. Crowley sneered. She seems controlled to me, Sadie said, standing despite her exhaustion. She's speaking truth to bullies just like her papa taught her. Your papa? Mrs. Crowley laughed ugly. Which one? The drunk Irishman who died in debt, or the crippled soldier who... The slap echoed through the church. Jenny Patterson stood over Mrs. Crowley, her hand still raised. You horrible woman, Jenny said. These people have shown more Christian charity than you ever have. When my children were sick, Sadie nursed them. When your own barn caught fire last month, oh yes, we all remember, who led the Bucket Brigade, Cole Hartley Bad Leg, and all. That doesn't change what they are, Crowley insisted, but his support was wavering. Then something unexpected happened. Old Mrs. Chen, who ran the boarding house, stood. She rarely spoke at town meetings, the Chinese widow, generally keeping to herself. I tell you story, she said in her accented but clear English. In my homeland there was drought. 7 months no rain. Village elders blame young couple who married against family's wishes. They drive couple out. You know what happened. Everyone leaned in. Nothing. Drought continue 4 more months. Couple died in wilderness. Village lost best farmer and best weaver. When rain finally come, it come with floods that destroy village. Not because of couple. Because that is what weather does. She sat back down, her piece said. Sheriff Thompson stood. I've been sheriff here for 12 years. I've seen this town through good times and bad. And I'm telling you now, if we turn on our neighbors because of weather, we're no better than the savages we claim to be civilizing. Then what do you suggest we do? Someone called out. It was Cole who answered. We share what we have. We dig deeper wells. We help each other survive. That's what communities do. Easy for you to say, Crowley spat. You've got Morrison money now. We have the same as everyone else, Sadie said. Less, actually, since we gave most of Father's money to the families his crimes hurt. This was news to many, and murmurs rippled through the crowd. It's true, Thompson confirmed. The Hartleys kept only enough to rebuild their ranch. The rest went to restitution. Before more could be said, the church doors burst open. Young Tom Miller ran in face red with exertion. Fire, he gasped. Lightning strike on the prairie. It's heading for the Henderson place. Lightning without rain. The drought's cruelest trick. The meeting dissolved into chaos as everyone rushed to help. The fire was a monster eating the dry grass like a hungry beast. The Hendersons' house stood directly in its path, with Mrs. Henderson and her 4 children trapped inside. Mr. Henderson was away in town. Cole didn't hesitate. Despite his leg, he ran toward the house, others following. They formed a bucket brigade, but the well was already low, the water pitiful against the advancing flames. We need to create a fire break, Cole shouted. Get every shovel, every pick. They worked frantically, digging a trench between the fire and the house. Cole's legs screamed, but he kept digging. Beside him, even Josiah Crowley worked, their conflict forgotten in the face of real danger. Ruby appeared with the other children, carrying wet blankets to beat at spot fires. Sadie, despite Cole's protests, organized the women in wetting down the house's walls. The fire reached the fire break and paused, seeking fuel. For a moment, it seemed they'd won. Then the wind shifted, sending embers flying over their heads, igniting the barn behind the house. "The animals!" Mrs. Henderson screamed. Without thinking, Cole ran into the burning barn. The smoke was thick, blinding. He could hear the horses screaming, the cattle bellowing in fear. He fumbled for the stall latch's muscle memory from his own barn, guiding him. One by one, he freed the animals, driving them out with slaps and shouts. The last horse, the Hendersons' plow horse, was frozen in terror. Cole grabbed its halter, pulling with all his strength. A beam cracked overhead. Cole shoved the horse toward the door, just as the timber fell, catching him across the back. He went down, hard fire all around him now. This was it, he thought. After everything, this was how it would end. But then hands grabbed him, multiple hands pulling him up, dragging him out. Crowley on one side, Sheriff Thompson on the other, more men behind. They burst from the barn just as it collapsed, sparks shooting into the night sky like failed stars. Cole lay on the ground, gasping, his back burning with pain. Sadie was there, suddenly, her hands on his face, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Don't you dare," she whispered fiercely. "Don't you dare leave us." "Not planning on it," he wheezed. The fire burned itself out against the firebreak, leaving the house standing, but the barn and fields destroyed. As dawn broke, the exhausted townspeople surveyed the damage. "We're ruined," Henderson said hollowly, having returned to find devastation. "No," Cole said, struggling to sit up despite his injuries. "We're not ruined. None of us are. We rebuild. Together." "With what?" Henderson asked. "There's no water, no crops, no feed for the animals." "Then we share what we have until we find more," Cole said. He looked at Crowley. "All of us." Crowley was silent for a long moment, his face dirty with soot and sweat. His wife started to speak, but he held up a hand. "You ran into that barn without hesitation," he said to Cole. "You saved my neighbor's livelihood, risked your life for animals that weren't even yours. Anyone would have—" "No," Crowley interrupted. "I didn't. I watched you run in and thought you were a fool. But you weren't a fool. You were being what I claimed to be, a Christian man." He turned to address the crowd. "I was wrong. The drought isn't God's punishment for accepting the Hartleys. If anything, it's God's test of whether we deserve them." Mrs. Crowley looked scandalized, but her husband continued, "I withdraw everything I said. These people—" He gestured at Cole, Sadie, and Ruby. "They're not the problem. They're the example." It wasn't a complete reconciliation. Too much had been said for that, but it was a beginning. Over the next days, the town pulled together like never before. Water was rationed and shared equally. Families with deeper wells shared with those whose wells had run dry. The little feed that remained was distributed based on need, not ownership. Cole, his back bandaged and movement limited, directed from his porch as men reinforced his well, digging it deeper. They'd hit a small underground stream, not much, but enough to share. "You should be in bed," Sadie scolded, bringing him water. "Can't rebuild lying down." He replied, then caught her hand. "How are you feeling?" "The baby." "We're fine," she assured him. "Strong. Like their papa." Ruby organized the children into a water-carrying brigade, making it a game to keep spirits up. She'd appointed herself as her father's nurse, bringing him food and reading to him from the Bible when the pain kept him awake. 2 weeks into the communal effort, clouds appeared on the horizon. Not the brass sky they'd grown used to, but real dark, heavy clouds. Don't get hopes up. People warned each other, but everyone watched anyway. The first drops fell at sunset, fat and warm and perfect. then more and more until it was a proper rain, the kind that soaked deep into the earth instead of running off. People stood in the streets, faces turned to the sky, some crying, some laughing, some praying. Ruby danced in the rain, spinning with her arms wide. Sadie stood in the doorway, hands on her growing belly, tears of relief on her face. Cole, despite his injured back, limped outside to stand in the rain with his family. Crowley approached rain streaming off his hat. "I owe you an apology, a real one." "No," Cole said. "You owe us nothing. Fear makes us all say things we don't mean." "I meant them when I said them," Crowley admitted. "But I was wrong. Your family. You've shown us what community really means." He offered his hand. Cole shook it. The rain lasted 3 days. Not enough to save the crops, but enough to refill wells and restore hope. The town would survive the winter, though it would be lean. A month later, as autumn crept in, a miracle of sorts occurred. A wagon train heading to California stopped in town, their leader sick with fever. Sadie and the town doctor nursed him back to health. In gratitude, the wagon master sold them his extra supplies at cost. Flour, beans, preserved meat, enough to see the town through winter. "It's like the loaves and fishes," Ruby announced at the town meeting where distribution was organized. "How so little one?" Reverend Mills asked. "Well, we all shared what little we had, and somehow it became enough for everyone. That's a miracle, isn't it?" "Yes," the Reverend agreed, looking at the Hartley family. "That's exactly what it is." Winter came early but mild, as if nature was apologizing for the brutal summer. Cole's back healed, though he'd always carry the scars from the burning beam. Sadie grew round with child, glowing with health, despite the hardships they'd faced. The town had changed. The shared suffering had forged bonds that prosperity never could. When the Hendersons' new barn was raised, everyone helped. When the Crowleys' well ran low again, the Hartleys shared theirs without being asked. On Christmas Eve, the church was packed. Reverend Mills asked if anyone wanted to share what they were grateful for. Ruby stood immediately. "I'm grateful for the drought," she said, surprising everyone. "Not because it was good, but because it showed us who we really are. We're not just people who live near each other, we're family." One by one, others stood to speak. Henderson thanked Cole for saving his animals. Mrs. Chen thanked the women who'd helped her when her boarding house well went dry. Even Mrs. Crowley, stiff and formal, thanked Sadie for sharing precious medicine when her youngest was sick. Finally, Cole stood slowly because of his back. 3 years ago, I wanted to die. He said simply, "My family was gone and I saw no reason to continue. Then God sent me a new family in the strangest way possible. A little girl running through a storm." He looked at Ruby and Sadie. "This year, we all ran through a storm together. We faced drought, fire, hunger, and fear. We could have turned on each other. For a moment, we almost did. But instead, we became what Ruby said, a family. That's not just a miracle. That's a choice we made every day when things got hard. And that choice saved us all." He sat down to silence, then thunderous applause. As they walked home through the gentle snow that had begun to fall, Ruby between them, Sadie's hand in his Cole, reflected on the year. They'd been tested by nature and by human nature. They'd seen the worst, the accusations, the fear, the anger, but they'd also seen the best, sacrifice, sharing, forgiveness. "Papa Cole," Ruby asked, "do you think next year will be easier?" Cole looked at his daughter, at his pregnant wife, at the town sleeping peaceful under new snow. "I don't know if it'll be easier," he said, "but I know we'll face it together, all of us." "That's enough," Ruby decided. "More than enough," Sadie agreed, leaning into Cole's warmth. As they reached their ranch, the moon broke through the clouds, illuminating the buildings they'd rebuilt once from fire and would rebuild again if needed. The house stood, strong smoke rising from the chimney windows, glowing with lamplight. Home, family, community. They'd all been tested in the crucible of crisis and had emerged not unscathed, but unbroken. The drought had ended, but the bonds it had forged would last generations. And in Sadie's womb, new life grew, a symbol of hope and continuity, proof that even in the hardest ground, with enough love and determination, something beautiful could take root and grow. The pain started just as the last winter snow was melting rivulets of water, running like veins across the land. Sadie gripped the porch rail, her knuckles white as another contraction rolled through her. "Cole," she called, her voice tight. He was at her side in an instant, his back still stiff from the fire injuries, but moving fast nonetheless. "Is it time?" "Past time," she gasped. "This baby's impatient." Ruby ran for Mrs. Chen, who delivered half the babies in the county with her quiet competence. Cole helped Sadie inside his hands, gentle but trembling slightly. It had been 9 years since Emily was born. 9 years since he'd been through this particular terror and joy. "I'm scared," Sadie admitted as he helped her to bed. "Me too," Cole said, kissing her forehead. "But we've faced worse and survived." The labor was long, stretching through the night and into the next morning. Cole never left her side, letting her crush his fingers through each contraction, whispering encouragement when she said she couldn't continue. Ruby kept the fire going and water boiling, her young face serious with responsibility. At 8 years old, she understood she was about to become a big sister, and she intended to do it right. "Papa Cole," she said during a quiet moment, "what if the baby doesn't like me?" "Impossible," Cole said firmly. How could anyone not like Ruby Hartley? Just as the sun reached its peak, painting the room in golden light, the baby's cry filled the air. Mrs. Chen placed the squalling infant on Sadie's chest, and both parents wept at the sight. "A son," Mrs. Chen announced, "healthy and loud." Cole touched the baby's tiny fist with one scarred finger, watching in wonder as the infant gripped it with surprising strength. "What should we name him?" Sadie asked, exhausted but radiant. Cole looked at this new life, this unexpected blessing, and thought of all the people who'd helped them reach this moment. "William," he said. "William Samuel Hartley, for your brother who saved me and your first husband who loved you." Sadie's eyes filled with fresh tears. "Are you sure?" "They're both part of our story," Cole said. "Without them, we wouldn't be here." Ruby edged into the room, eyes wide with curiosity. "Can I see him?" "Come meet your brother," Sadie said, making room for Ruby on the bed. Ruby studied the baby seriously. "He's very small." "You were smaller," Sadie told her. "Really?" Ruby seemed skeptical. "Was I that red and wrinkly too?" "Redder," Cole said. "And much louder." Ruby gently touched the baby's cheek. "Hi, William. I'm Ruby. I'm going to teach you everything. How to ride horses and read books and stand up to bullies. But first, you need to get bigger." The baby opened his eyes, seeming to look right at her. "He knows me," Ruby exclaimed. "Of course he does," Cole said. "He's been listening to your voice for months." The news of William's birth spread quickly through the town. By afternoon, visitors began arriving with gifts: blankets, preserves, carved toys. The Hendersons brought a cradle Mr. Henderson had made. The Crowleys, transformed by the drought crisis, brought enough firewood for a month. Even Sheriff Thompson came bringing an unexpected visitor. "Someone to see you," he said, stepping aside. Judge Morrison stood in the doorway, thin and aged, but free. Cole's hand went to his gun instinctively. "Wait," Morrison said quickly. "I'm here legally. My sentence was commuted, time served, and restitution paid." "Father," Sadie said weakly from the bed. "I know I have no right to be here," Morrison said. "But when I heard about the baby, I had to come. I have so little time left." It was true. Morrison was clearly dying, his skin gray, his breathing labored. Cole looked at Sadie, saw her nod slightly, and stepped aside. 5 minutes. Morrison approached the bed slowly, his eyes on the baby. "A son. A Hartley son. His name is William," Ruby said, still protective. "William Samuel Hartley." Morrison's composure cracked. "You named him after After good men, Sadie said firmly. Men who sacrificed for others. Morrison sank into the chair beside the bed. I wish I could have been a good man. I wish I'd chosen differently. You chose to come back, Ruby said, surprising everyone. You chose to tell the truth about Mr. Tanner's brother. That was good. Morrison looked at his granddaughter, this wise child he'd never really known. You have your mother's heart, he said, and your father's courage. Both fathers, Ruby said proudly. Morrison reached into his coat with shaking hands, pulling out a small leather book. I wrote it all down, he said. Everything. The truth about what I did, but also the truth about your mother's childhood, your Uncle William, the family history Ruby and William deserve to know. The good and the bad. He set the book on the bedside table. I don't ask for forgiveness. I just ask that someday, when they're old enough, you'll let them read it. Let them know where they came from, all of it. Sadie reached out and took her father's hand. Stay for dinner. Sadie, Cole started. He's dying, Cole, she said quietly. And he's my father. Whatever else he is, he's my father. Morrison stayed not just for dinner, but for 3 days. He held his grandson, told Ruby stories about her mother as a child, and helped Cole with the spring planting, despite his weakness. On the third night, sitting on the porch watching the sunset, Morrison spoke to Cole alone. I hated you once, he said. When Sadie married Sam, I blamed men like you. Poor men who dared to reach above their station. And now I see what I missed. You're not reaching above anything. You're exactly where you belong with the family you deserve. Morrison coughed specks of blood on his handkerchief. Take care of them. Always, Cole promised. Morrison died that night peacefully in his sleep. They buried him in the town cemetery, his grave marked with a simple stone that read, Harrison Morrison, father, grandfather, flawed man who tried to make amends. Spring bloomed fully. After that, the land responding to the winter snow and spring rains with explosive growth. The wheat Cole planted grew tall and golden. The vegetables in Sadie's garden flourished, and baby William grew round and happy. Ruby had taken to being a big sister with enthusiasm, constantly entertaining William with songs and stories. She'd also started school properly, her quick mind absorbing everything. Papa Cole, she said one evening, teacher says I could go to the academy in St. Louis when I'm older for advanced learning. Cole felt his chest tighten. The thought of Ruby leaving even for education was painful, but he kept his voice steady. Is that what you want? I don't know, Ruby admitted. I want to learn everything, but I also want to stay here with you and Mama and William. You've got years to decide, Sadie said, nursing William. Whatever you choose, we'll support you. The summer passed peacefully, a marked contrast to the previous year's drought. The harvest was abundant, not just for the Hartleys, but for everyone. The community had learned its lessons about sharing and preparing, and surplus was stored communally for lean times. Cole had accepted the deputy sheriff position, working part-time to help keep order. It suited him, the ability to protect and serve without the full weight of authority. His reputation as a fair man who'd stand against any injustice made even the rowdiest cowboys think twice about causing trouble. One day in late summer, a letter arrived that would change everything again. It was from Constance in Boston, her elaborate script unmistakable. My dear family, Sadie read aloud. I write with news both sad and hopeful. My health is failing, and doctors give me perhaps 6 months. However, I have made provisions. My entire estate is to be divided between Ruby and William, held in trust until they reach majority. But more importantly, I've established a school fund for the town specifically for children whose families cannot afford education. It will be called the Morrison Hartley Fund, honoring both the family's past sins and its redemption. The letter continued with details, but the sum was staggering, enough to build a proper schoolhouse, hire additional teachers, and provide supplies for dozens of children. We can't accept this, Cole said immediately. It's not for us. Sadie pointed out. It's for the town. For children like Ruby was like William Wilby. The town meeting to discuss the gift was emotional. Some felt it was blood money tainted by the Morrison crimes. Others saw it as justice wealth, finally serving those it had once exploited. It was Ruby who swayed them. Standing before the assembled town, she spoke with clarity beyond her years. "Money isn't good or bad," she said. "It's just money. What matters is what we do with it. My grandfather did bad things to get this money, but my Aunt Constance wants to do good things with it. If we refuse it because of where it came from, those children won't get educated. How does grandfather win? But if we take it and use it to make sure every child in this town can read and write and figure, then we've turned something bad into something good." That's what Papa Cole taught me. We can't change the past, but we can choose the future. The vote was unanimous. The Morrison Hartley School would be built. Construction began in the fall, the whole town participating. Cole, despite his back, helped frame the walls. Sadie organized the women in sewing curtains and making supplies. Ruby appointed herself assistant to everyone, carrying nails, bringing water, offering unsolicited advice. William, now crawling, would escape his blanket and head determinedly toward whatever looked most dangerous, keeping everyone on alert. "He's going to be trouble," Mrs. Chen observed, catching him before he could eat a handful of nails. "He's a Hartley," Sadie said with fond exasperation. "Of course he's going to be trouble." The school opened just before Christmas with 23 students enrolled. Ruby was chosen to ring the bell for the first time, the bronze sound carrying across the snow-covered town like a promise. That Christmas was unlike any before. The town gathered not in separate celebrations, but together in the new school. Catholics and Protestants, Chinese and Irish, established families and newcomers, all together. Reverend Mills offered a blessing that captured the moment. "Lord, we thank you for second chances, for the courage to change, the strength to forgive, and the wisdom to know that we're stronger together than apart. Bless this school, these children, and this community that has chosen hope over fear, love over hate, future over past." Cole stood with his family, Sadie holding William Ruby pressed against his side, and felt something he'd thought lost forever, complete. Not perfect, for the scars remained physical and emotional, but complete in the way that broken things become whole, again, different, but stronger at the mended places. "Papa Cole," Ruby whispered, "are you crying?" "Just something in my eye," he said roughly. "Me too," she said, wiping her own tears. "Must be dusty in here." Sadie laughed, the sound bright as Christmas bells. William clapped his chubby hands, delighted by the noise. And Cole pulled them all closer, this unlikely family forged from loss and found in love. As the celebration continued around them, Cole thought about the journey that had brought them here. A desperate child running through a storm, a broken soldier opening his door, a woman choosing love over safety, a town learning to see beyond its prejudices. It hadn't been easy. It had been messy and painful, and sometimes seemingly impossible. But they'd made it through all of them, and on the other side, found something worth every struggle. A future bright with possibility, a community bound by shared trials, a family that chose each other every day. "Next year will be even better," Ruby declared with the confidence of youth. "How do you know?" Cole asked. "Because we'll be together," she said simply. "And together we can face anything." Looking at his daughter, his wife, his son, his town, Cole knew she was right. They'd been tested by drought and fire, by prejudice and past sins, by loss and fear. They'd survived it all and emerged not unscarred, but undefeated. The broken soldier was broken no more. The desperate woman had found her strength. The wise child had found her place. And the baby boy would grow up in a world made better by their struggles. This was rebirth. This was redemption. This was home. 10 years had passed since that desperate night when Ruby ran through the storm, and now she stood in the same barn, though rebuilt twice over adjusting her graduation dress in the reflection of a polished harness. At 18, she'd grown tall like her birth father, but carried herself with Sadie's grace and Cole's quiet strength. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," Sadie said from the doorway, William on her hip and another baby 3-year-old Margaret holding her hand. "Do I look educated?" Ruby asked with a nervous laugh. She was the first from their town to complete the academy in St. Louis, returning home for a celebration that had the whole community buzzing. "You look like someone who's going to change the world," Cole said, entering with his distinctive gait, barely noticeable now unless you knew to look for it. "I just want to change our little piece of it," Ruby said. "I'm going to teach at the Morrison Hartley School. Miss Peterson is retiring, and they've offered me the position." Cole and Sadie exchanged glances. They'd expected Ruby to pursue opportunities in the city, maybe even back east. "Are you sure?" Sadie asked. "You could do anything, go anywhere." Ruby walked to them, taking Margaret from Sadie and settling her on her hip with practiced ease. "This is where I'm needed. This is where I can make the most difference. Besides," she smiled at Cole, "Papa taught me that the best things in life aren't found by running away. They're built by staying and fighting for what matters." Cole had to turn away ostensibly to check a harness, but really to compose himself. The graduation celebration was held at the school Ruby would soon lead. The building had been expanded twice now, serving 43 students from all backgrounds. The Crowleys' youngest son would be Ruby's student, as would the Chen grandchildren and the newest arrivals, a black family who'd come north seeking freedom and found it in this unlikely town. Sheriff Thompson, now gray-haired and thinking of retirement, called for silence. 10 years ago, this town almost tore itself apart over fear and prejudice. Today, we celebrate not just Ruby Hartley's achievement, but what we've all achieved together. He gestured to the gathered crowd. "Look around. Every color, every creed, every background. We're not perfect. Lord knows we still have our quarrels, but we've learned something precious. Our differences make us stronger, not weaker." Jenny Patterson, now mayor after her husband's death, stood next. "Ruby, you could have stayed in St. Louis. They offered you positions there. Why come back?" Ruby stood poised and confident. "Because this is where I learned that broken things can be mended. This is where I saw a town choose love over fear. This is where my papa, my real papa, the one who chose me, taught me that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what's right despite the fear." She looked at Cole directly. "He was broken when we met. Mama was desperate. I was terrified. This town was divided. But look at us now. We're not perfect, but we're whole. We're family. All of us." Old Mrs. Chen, 90 now, but still sharp, spoke up. "In my country we say, when the roots are deep, there is no reason to fear the wind. This town, these people, we are each other's roots now." As the celebration continued, Cole found himself standing outside, looking at the stars. The same stars he'd stared at in despair 15 years ago when Margaret and Emily had died. The same stars that had witnessed Ruby running through the storm Sadie's arrival at his door, their awkward first days as a family. "Regrets?" Sadie asked, joining him, linking her arm through his. "None," Cole said. "You, only one," she said. "I wish Sam could see Ruby now. He'd be so proud." "He knows," Cole said with certainty. "Somehow he knows." William, now 10, and the spitting image of Cole, despite no blood relation, ran up to them. "Papa Ruby says I can help her with the little kids' reading class." "That's a big responsibility," Cole said seriously. "I can do it," William said, puffing out his chest. "I'm a Hartley. Hartleys always help." As he ran off, Sadie laughed. "He's more like you every day." "Poor kid," Cole said, but his smile was proud. The evening was winding down when an unexpected visitor arrived. A young man, well-dressed but travel-worn, asking for the Hartley family. "I'm James Morrison," he said. "Judge Morrison's nephew from Philadelphia. I've been searching for you for months." The family tensed, but the young man held up his hands peacefully. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here because I've been investigating my uncle's crimes, trying to make amends to all the families he hurt. I've established a fund, and I wanted to personally apologize and offer restitution." "We don't need Morrison money," Cole said automatically. "With respect, sir, it's not for you. It's for them." He gestured to the gathering. "Every family my uncle's schemes touched. I've already distributed funds in other towns. This is the last stop because I was afraid to face you, the ones who suffered most, but somehow forgave." Ruby stepped forward. "Your uncle died seeking forgiveness. He found it, at least from us. You don't need to carry his guilt." James's composure cracked. "How can you be so forgiving after everything?" "Because holding on to hate is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die," Ruby said. "My papa taught me that. Both my papas, actually, the one who died for principles and the one who lived for them. The funds James distributed would help families start businesses, send children to school, build new homes. But more importantly, his visit closed a circle that had begun with corruption and ended with redemption." As the gathering finally ended and families headed home, the Hartleys walked together, Cole and Sadie Ruby William and little Margaret sleeping in Cole's arms. They passed the cemetery where Sam Turner lay, where Judge Morrison rested, where Cole's first family slept. "Do you ever wonder," Sadie asked, "what would have happened if Ruby hadn't run to your barn that night?" "Every day," Cole admitted. "I'd probably be dead, or worse still, among the living dead." "And I'd have lost everything," Sadie added. "Instead, we gained everything," Ruby said, taking both their hands. They reached their ranch as the moon rose full and bright. The house stood strong, expanded over the years to hold their growing family. The barn was full of healthy animals. The fields were rich with growing wheat. But more than the physical prosperity, there was something deeper, a sense of rightness of being exactly where they belonged. That night, as had become their tradition, they sat on the porch together. Cole played the fiddle he'd learned in honor of Sam. Sadie sang lullabies to Margaret. Ruby read from her teaching plans. William whittled his young hands, careful with the knife Cole had taught him to use. "Tell us the story," Margaret demanded sleepily, "the one about the storm." It was their family legend now told and retold until it had taken on the quality of myth while remaining absolutely true. Once upon a time, Cole began, his voice rich with memory. There was a broken soldier who thought his life was over, but God had other plans. He sent an angel in the form of a desperate little girl running through the storm. As he told the story, Ruby watched her family. This beautiful, unlikely, perfect family built from loss and found in love. She thought about the students she'd soon teach, the lessons she'd share, not just reading and arithmetic, but the deeper truths she'd learned, that families aren't always made by blood, that communities are strongest when they embrace their differences, that broken things can indeed be stronger at the mended places. And they all lived happily ever after. Margaret asked as the story ended, though she knew the answer. "No." Cole said, as he always did. "They lived really ever after, with struggles and joys, losses and gains, tears and laughter, but always, always together." "That's better than happily," Margaret decided, snuggling deeper into his arms. "Much better," Sadie agreed, her hand finding Cole's in the darkness. As the night deepened and the stars wheeled overhead, the Hartley family sat together on their porch, complete and content. They'd found each other in the storm and chosen each other in the calm. They'd faced drought and plenty, prejudice and acceptance, death and birth. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Ruby would begin teaching, shaping young minds with the wisdom earned through struggle. William would grow into a man of principle like his namesakes. Margaret would carry forward the story of how love conquers fear. And Cole and Sadie would grow old together, surrounded by the family they'd built from ashes. But tonight, in this perfect moment, They simply existed together, proof that sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the most broken ground, that love is not diminished by being shared, but multiplied, that families are made not by perfect beginnings, but by the choice to keep choosing each other through every imperfect day. The broken soldier and the desperate woman had become something neither could have imagined that stormy night so long ago, whole, not unscarred, but undefeated, not perfect, but perfectly themselves. And in the town that had once whispered in judgment, children would grow up learning their story, understanding that redemption is possible, that second chances are sacred, and that sometimes when you open your door to someone else's storm, you find your own salvation. The end. Now, friend. Cole's voice seemed to whisper across time to those who would hear this tale, you know our story. The storm that brought us together, the love that kept us strong, the community that lifted us up. Remember this, when your own storms come, you're never too broken to be mended, never too lost to be found, never too alone to be loved. Open your door, take the chance, build something beautiful from the ashes. That's what we did here in Missouri all those years ago, and that's what you can do wherever you are, whenever you're ready. The storm always passes, but what you build after, that's what lasts forever.